All right. Good morning to one and all. I call to order the October meeting of the University of Minnesota Board of Regents. Good morning to one and all. I'll note that we are meeting in a hybrid format this morning with Regents Farnsworth, Kenyanya, and Rocha connected to the boardroom via Zoom. And so we'll move right to the agenda. The first item of business before us is approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any Regent questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All opposed, say no. All right, that motion is approved. Next, we'll hear the report of the president. President Gable.
Thank you, Chair Powell, Vice Chair Sviggum, and members of the board. It has been quite a start to the fall semester. In walking the hallways and sidewalks of all of our campuses, there is vibrancy, activity, traditions are buzzing safely, but with energy, along with our core mission of learning, discovery, and engagement that has defined and advanced the institution across the last nearly 170 years. I think we saw a wonderful example of this with thanks to Dean Jacob Toller and his team during the board's tour of the Health Sciences Education Center, where the future of clinical training and activity was highlighted with case-based coursework, virtual reality, and all of the work that we do there on full display. So many thanks to the team for their assistance with that tour.
President Joan Gable made a promise to the University of Minnesota community in 2020. She has not lived up to this promise. In the time she promised that the University of Minnesota Police Department would divest from the Minneapolis Police Department, which we know to be a very, very harmful institution. In the time since, we have seen countless examples of the University of Minnesota Police Department collaborating with the Minneapolis Police Department and other metro polices. This includes the past election protests in November of 2020, when nearly 700 people were arrested just off campus with help of the University of Minnesota Police Department. This includes after the police murder of Dante Wright in Brooklyn Center, when my own friends, University of Minnesota students, were arrested, and this happened along with the help of the University of Minnesota Police Department.
Okay, I'm going to call for order now. We want to continue with our meeting.
This is to say that the
You've handed
University of
out your
Minnesota
letter.
Police
I want
Department
order, please.
has been called in to violently arrest University of Minnesota students and our surrounding community. This is
I'm gonna call for
state-sponsored
order,
repression
please.
at the hands of the University of Minnesota Police
All right.
Department. Students at the university deserve public agents,
All right, board.
our own agency in regard to our so-called public safety.
And we'll cut the feed.
Students at the university deserve a civilian police
take a recess.
accountability council as a means to disarm, demilitarize, and defund the University of Minnesota Police Department. This council should be made up of elected students, unionized staff,
Okay, we are back in session. We were hearing from President Gabel and her report.
I believe I was thanking Dr. Tolar for the tour yesterday. Okay, so later in this meeting, you'll receive a formal update on the PEAK initiative, which actually I think ties beautifully to the work you heard from and the thoughts that you all shared with Rick Beyer during the governance session this morning. Myron and Ken will be providing a roadmap of recommendations, which will guide some future discussions. So I will defer going into detail knowing that that report is coming, and instead give you an update on the fall semester. So members of the board, we remain vigilant with regard to the pandemic and our fight against it, with safety as our top priority, while concurrently fulfilling our mission to teach, research, and serve. So various steps have been taken, which have been reported to you many times, but just as a reminder, we have a mask mandate, a vaccine mandate. We have done HVAC review of the classroom. We have made PPE available with training on how to ensure its proper usage. We have done a lot of work around scheduling and classroom capacity. And as a result, our cases are extremely low. We have no clusters or surges in a classroom after already being, and this is across the system, after already being at work for many weeks, different amounts on each campus. Our vaccine rates are very high. As we know, getting vaccinated is the best thing we can do in our fight against the pandemic, and the Get the Vax 2.0 program is going very well. So as of this morning, today is the deadline for students to file their paperwork, so we will know more by the end of the day today. But as of this morning, 89.6% of students have reported, and amongst those students, 96.27% are fully vaccinated. And with faculty and staff attestation, 98.66% have reported, with 94.85% fully vaccinated. 100% vaccination is the goal. It does not exist in reality. So given that reality, these are extremely high numbers. We are very pleased, and it is the cornerstone and key at the same time for why our cases are so low and our ability to continue to do the work that we've been doing safely. So we have had a few changes, though, since the last time we were together. To be consistent with MDH and CDC guidance, and after some consultation across the university earlier this week, we did provide new resources and updated resources and guidance for individuals who do test positive for COVID-19, because while cases are extremely low, they are not zero. So this shift is to aid individuals who test positive so that they know what to do around notifying people around whom they may have created exposure quickly, both in our learning environments or in the workplace, as the case may be. And then this complements the efforts by public health officials around patient interviews and contact tracing. So these decisions reflect our increased understanding of where and how COVID-19 is being transmitted in this environment, and also the role that the vaccines and these mitigating steps that we've taken play in the transmission rates. So we've launched a new page called Inform on the Safe Campus website. The Safe Campus website is the home for just everything these days. And it gives instructions on what to do if you test positive, including how to inform close contacts, what to do if you're notified by someone that you were in close contact with that they have tested positive. And there is guidance for those who are fully vaccinated and those who are not fully vaccinated. Even though the number is small, we certainly want to make sure to address both concerns. Across this guidance and across recent months, we have worked so closely with students, faculty, and staff. It is very difficult to reach what I would call agreement on what the appropriate steps are. It's a very difficult period to navigate through, but there is no question of the hard work and commitment of everyone to create the safe environment to serve our students well, to engage in our research, and to fulfill our mission otherwise. And so I'm really grateful to everyone, including those who have advocated the loudest, because that is what drives us towards this success that we're experiencing right now. I give this report with full appreciation for the fact that we may need to gracefully pivot, as the case may be. The ground has not been The ground has been shifting pretty continuously for the last, I don't know, 20 months now, since my timeline is the Duluth retreat. Everything goes back to the Duluth retreat. So we have said in our planning meetings that if we had just 90 days of consistency, we could switch from being reactive to proactive around pandemic planning. But as we all know, that has not happened. So with hope for that to come in the future, this is where we are right now. And we would, of course, keep you fully informed if any of these guardrails or standards change. In another attribute of safety, I want to give you an update on public safety. So we've been working very hard to protect the safety of those in our immediate and surrounding neighborhoods. We had a short summary on this yesterday from Myron Franz, Senior Vice President Franz, in response to Regent Verhaelen's question. Building upon that report, we have a layered and comprehensive approach to safety that has always existed, but I would describe it as ramped up in recent months. We've hired 3 additional UMPD officers. We have hired a social worker, and we have hired a community liaison. And that combination gives our UMPD force the capacity to increase presence in patrols, engage in preventative work. Our social worker can guide and inform the response to calls that lean into those needs as opposed to emergency response or crime reduction. And the community liaison helps with safety, helps with Q&A, helps with the flow of the neighborhoods as students come in and out and go back and forth to where they're living, where they're eating, or where they're enjoying their time. We've also done several things around prevention, including the installation of blue light kiosks. We've added self-defense classes. We've reestablished Go for Chauffeur, which was paused during the pandemic. We've acquired and tested the Rave Escort app, which is a virtual escort. We have a cohesive lighting plan in development with Xcel Energy, and we've launched our new safety guide program, which is humans, not like a guide that you would hold in your hand. Many of you may have already been greeted or assisted by our safety guides. They're wearing guide shirts, baseball caps. They're very visible. They provide a welcoming presence in addition to enhancing community concerns and maintaining the connections to keep our community safe with these escort services, social services, and they're just a set of eyes and ears in the community. As you've heard, we've been coordinating with the City of Minneapolis and the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office to increase patrols and visibility, in addition to our own UMPD patrols, many of which are on overtime. The shift is now to UMPD as they staff up and are able to do so with extra shifts through the fall semester in partnership with local law enforcement. So all of this is prioritized around student, faculty, and staff safety, but there's also full appreciation and respect for the fact that safety is something that people define differently based on their lived experience. And so at the same time that we're doing this work to reduce crime in the surrounding neighborhoods, we are working through the MSAFE program, which is the program developed in response to Dr. Cedric Alexander's review of UMPD. That work has a large representative committee of students, faculty, staff, alums, community partners, looking at how we continue to provide policing, but in a way that utterly and respectfully reflects our values and respects the absolute commitment to be inclusive around what it takes to make every member of our community feel safe. Shifting gears, I'd like to update you on some new additions to our leadership team. So first, Dr. Nisha Bachwe was selected as the next dean of the Humphrey School. She will start January 10th, 2020. CLA Dean John Coleman chaired that search. Dr. Andrew Aline was selected as the next dean of CSE, also effective June 10th, 2020, with thanks to Carlson Dean Sri Zahir for chairing that search. And Alejandra Peña Gutierrez was selected as the next director of the Wiseman Art Museum, effective November 29th, with thanks to Professor Thomas Fisher and Regent Emerita Patricia Simmons for co-chairing that search, and to former Provost and Executive Vice President Karen Hansen for serving in an interim role to lead the Wiseman as we undertook this search. So we have a very exciting set of people with experiences, expertise, and perspective. Their backgrounds are detailed in the docket, so I will defer the details on their backgrounds for your review of those materials. But there were a lot of search committees involved in bringing all of those people to campus. Want to extend my thanks to all of them. And I particularly want to extend my thanks to Rachel Croson, our provost, who chairs, ultimately facilitates all of these searches at the same time in her first year, while managing through the pandemic. So with many thanks to Rachel. Next, I'd like to update you on some work we're doing around university history and our public history and our commitment to develop and enhance the transparency around the university's history and sustain our effort beyond the recently completed April 2019 board charge. Because this work really never ends, in a manner of speaking. It is a journey or a quest rather than a destination. We'll be doing some shared governance consultation this month around the comprehensive review of the namings policy and expect to bring a new version to you for review at the December meeting. I'd also like to call your attention to the upcoming October 18th event with award-winning poet and activist Nikki Finney entitled Hotbeds: Insurgent Design for Collaborative Transformation. This is the second in a three-part series with Nikki, which began last year and is part of our broader Voice, Art, and Community series. Nikki is a National Book Award winning poet. The work that Nikki is doing with us is collaborated by current National Book Award finalist Douglas Kearney, who's on the faculty in our poetry department in the Twin Cities. The event is free and open to the public, but registration is required. So I encourage you to join us if you would be so inclined. Other events that have transpired that I want to make you aware of, several that I've participated in, so you know sort of the comings and goings. We welcomed our alumni home during Gopher Homecoming, including participating in the Alumni Awards events, the UMAA Board of Directors meeting, and the pre-parade reception, and then parade. The Alumni Association did a wonderful job with homecoming, and people were clearly delighted to be back celebrating in person again. We welcomed our new and returning fellows as part of the President's Postdoctoral Fellowship Program, which aims to advance diversification of the Academy, which is a priority for MPAC 2025. We all participated in Gail Klatt's retirement reception. I participated in the Task Force on Higher Education and Opportunity. We had the opening of Pillsbury Hall. I gave and have resumed our At the Table with Gable interviews with the Minnesota Daily. And we just had yesterday a special meeting of the University Senate. I've personally engaged in board service for the Council on Competitiveness, ACE, Greater MSP, the Minnesota Business Partnership, and the Executive Council for Young Women's Initiative. We've had meetings of the Twin Cities Deans, the System Council, the Cabinet, the FCC, University Senate, and EMPC, and we had our senior leadership team retreat just a few days ago. So we've been very active this semester, very grateful for the opportunity to engage hybrid, over Zoom, face-to-face, and beyond over these recent weeks. So these aren't easy times, but this engagement does remind me that things are going quite well, despite the challenges that we're facing with our record incoming class, the launch of exciting, innovative programs, cutting-edge research, record-setting patent productivity and other innovation, real progress on our commitment to equity and inclusion, real progress on our commitment to operational efficiency while retaining and improving quality, record-setting philanthropic support. There are things going on right now that should inspire pride. But as we've started to develop a tradition of doing, I'd like to close my report with some shout outs that make us all UMN proud. So a shout out to the Alumni Association, Student Affairs, all of our colleges and alumni who made this year's Twin Cities Homecoming such a great success. A shout out to our School of Law's results on the July 2021 Minnesota Board of Law Examiners bar exam. 96.3% of our first-time test takers passed, representing the highest rate in the state compared to 76.2% pass rate statewide. A shout out to Bernie Galacek, the university's vice president and chief information officer, for his recognition as a finalist of the Orby Award, which reflects his and his team's work to help us all go remote during the pandemic. A shout out to Tad Johnson, who is the university senior director for American Indian Tribal Relations, for being recognized with a Lifetime Achievement Award by the Native American Finance Officers Association. A shout out to Vicki Courtney, director of the University Senate Office and Awards and Honors Program, for her incredible work of elevating governance, collaboration, and consultation for over 4 decades at the U. She is retiring on December 3rd, and I hope you will join me in expressing appreciation for her countless contributions, acts of service, talent, good humor, and of course, in wishing her the best. And lastly, as has become a practice, we have a video shout out so that you can see some of the other great happenings across the university. That concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Oh, thank you, President Gable. We always look forward to your report, and this one particularly inspiring. Turning to my report, I also, on behalf of the board, want to thank Dr. Toller and his team for the tour of the new Health Sciences Education Center yesterday. Dr. Toller, that was terrific. You should have seen us go through our gown up exercise. There's some talent. We were coached. We were coached by Dr. Johnson, but we're good. Throughout, as you know, throughout the last 18 months, we've put our campus visits on hold. And I know we've all missed those opportunities to visit with students and faculty, and we do look forward to more opportunities like the one we had yesterday in the months ahead. I know that we're planning some that I think you'll really enjoy. Yesterday's visit to the Health Sciences Center also presented an opportunity to connect the university's ongoing work to the board's priority to advance implementation of significant health sciences strategies to enhance medical education, improve clinical care, and better serve the people of our state. And we're going to continue our focus on that priority in the meeting today when Dr. Toller will join us for a discussion on the clinical research elements of our health sciences strategy. We look forward to that. I outlined the board's annual priorities in my report at the September meeting, and I do want to take this opportunity to highlight a few other items from this month's board and committee agendas that do connect directly to our strategic priorities. Yesterday in the Finance and Operations Committee meeting, Vice President Tonneson provided an overview of the university's budget model, which is an important step towards the priority to oversee the PEAK initiative and related reforms to the university's budget model. Also in Finance and Operations, we had a review of the Twin Cities Campus Master Plan, which of course connects strongly to our priority to engage around campus planning and efforts to align physical space with strategic priorities. And in the mission fulfillment meeting yesterday, we discussed the system strategic enrollment plan, a critical component of MPACT 2025 and our priority to oversee the implementation of a system-wide strategic plan and individual campus enrollment strategies. And finally, I'll note that today we'll begin a series of conversations related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Today we'll focus on the Twin Cities campus, but throughout the year ahead, we will have campus-specific conversations for Crookston, Duluth, Morris, and Rochester. I'll conclude my report there, and we'll turn to the next agenda item, which is item 4, receive and file reports. And I'll just ask everyone to note that we don't have any reports this month. Next, we'll consider the consent report. I'll note that there's a request that we call out or separate the regent nomination, a part of that report. And so I'll ask if there's a motion to approve the consent report, setting aside the regent nomination point. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any questions or comments on the consent report? Okay, so Mr. Steves, can we approve so I'll ask for a vote on that report X the regent nominations. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you, Regent Roche. Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes. And so we'll now turn to the regent nominations section of the consent report. Mr. Steves, maybe you can give us, will you give us a background on that part of the consent report?
Sure, Mr. Chair and members of the board, these are Board of Regents nominations to the University of Minnesota Foundation Board of Trustees by board policy. There are 3 seats that are reserved for sitting members of the Board of Regents. And so you actually see that there are a couple of sitting regents who are nominated to these seats. And then the overall composition of their board requires that 25% of their board is nominated by this board. And so that's been kind of longstanding practice, and the foundation reports that it's quite beneficial to them to have that connection point with this board and with this board's nominees.
And just as a reminder, the Regent nominees are Regent Davenport, Regent Hipsch, and then Eric Torgensen will also be nominated, and Rich Osland, who is currently on the board, will also be nominated by us. So that's the situation. Any questions or comments on Regent nominations? Regent Rocha?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be quick. The purpose for the request, and I made the request, is that I understand that, as Mr. Steves just explained, that board policy provides for board members to be on the Board of Trustees. The board has a appointment authority for a portion, not a majority of the trustees. And my concern over time, which I believe I've stated before, is that there's a tension with respect to members of the Board of Regents serving on this committee, that they have the missions are the same, they're complementary, they're not identical, and just kind of on behalf of the Board of Regents of 2060, Foundation's endowment is $100 billion in a very large percentage of the university's total funding. There's potential for some tension there as to the Board of Regents' capacity to guide the direction of the institution versus the foundation. Whereas if we had emissaries or representatives as a part of the foundation, but yet we as a board, provide oversight to ensure that the institution or that the entity that's raising money in the University of Minnesota's name is on track with our mission, our direction for the university, that would work. Or if the board perhaps had the ability to appoint the majority of that board, that would make a difference as well. But in the absence of those things, I don't believe that it's the best policy for us to have members serving on both our board and that board. That being said, I have absolutely no concern at all about the exceptional people that are on this, that are put forward. I'm not consulted on who we put forward, but based on the people that have been put forward and the members of our board that are being nominated, I have absolutely no concern at all that they're excellent choices, and therefore my intent is to abstain from voting so as not to give the appearance that it's a concern about the individuals. But I just think that I think that that's a policy that at some point we should reconsider as to how that relationship is structured, especially as we look at some of these very large decisions about development on our eastern campus, the eastern frontier of our campus, and so on. So thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I have to add.
Thank you, Regent Rocha, for those comments. Anyone else like to have with questions or comments on this part of the consent report? All right, hearing none, I will ask for the vote then on the Regent nomination component of the consent report.
Mr. Chair, I think Regent Farnsworth had a hand up. I could be.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Thank you, Regent Rocha. Regent Farnsworth, excuse me.
No, thank you, Chair Powell. And I just also like to state my intention to abstain in this part as well for the reasons Regent Rocha stated. I have no problem at all with individuals who are being nominated today. I'm more concerned about and have questions about and want to learn more about kind of the longstanding board practice around this and kind of the, again, complementary, but potential for some wrinkles in kind of our governance and process. So just wanted to note my intention as well and kind of second a lot of the points that Regent Rocha was making. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Regent Farnsworth. Anyone, Regent McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Powell. I just note, so we're clear, it is board policy, not board practice, that puts this quarter of the total of the UMF board in our power. And having, and I appreciate the concerns Regent Rocha raised. We've discussed them over our joint time on the board several times. And I personally think that what we have works. And having served as a trustee and a regent a couple times now, I found that it works in practice. And the concerns Regent Rocha raised are certainly theoretical, but I think we've managed to stay nicely aligned, and the UMF board understands that ultimately we're in charge, and I think it all works out. But I do respect his concerns. I just wanted to add that this is not a board practice. This is a board policy issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent McMillan. Regent Mayron.
Yes, and along those lines, and Director Steves can correct me if I'm wrong, but my memory is that the board policy on this also is very explicit that ultimately the fiduciary duty of the regents who are on that board lies with the university. That is our ultimate fiduciary duty. So to the extent that there is any perception of a conflict between duties to the foundation board or duties to the university board trumps. And if I'm wrong about that, Director Steves, but that's my memory about how we addressed this in the last year or two.
General Counsel Peterson, you may want to or wish to comment on the point just made by Regent Mayron.
Chair Powell, thank you. Regent Mayron, your comments certainly are a good segue to my thoughts, which I know some of you have heard on a previous occasion. But to me, this question of the relationship between board service on this board and board service on the foundation board centers on the duty of loyalty question. And what reconciles it in practice, as you've referenced, is the fact that it is a fiduciary duty and for board members on the foundation board, it is also their charter mission to serve and benefit the University of Minnesota. So that mission largely resolves the conflict of interest question. Nevertheless, in practice, if one wants to think about this in a more hypothetical fashion, you need to then divorce or distinguish what I would characterize as a conflict of authority versus a conflict of interest. I mean, this question of what is it that serves and benefits the University of Minnesota obviously is a broad question. Reasonable minds can differ. And so it may be that the foundation board on a given day will, have its own sincerely held view of what that means that won't necessarily match up with what the board may think about the same question, but it's not necessarily that that's immediately a conflict of interest unless the Board of Regents has also sort of spoken on the matter. And that's where the ultimate authority of the university and this board describes what the aims and goals of the University of Minnesota are, that then kind of dictates the charter mission of the foundation as they're serving and benefiting the University of Minnesota. So that has a sort of a nuanced life to it that, as Regent McMillan notes, irons out in practice, because you have a lot of good people, all of whom are working hard to serve and benefit this university.
Thank you, General Counsel. Any other questions or comments? Do you see any, Mr. Steves?
I do not.
All right, seeing none, then
It looks like Regent Kenyanya has his hand up.
Regent Rocha, defender.
Thank you, Regent Rocha, for keeping me in line. Regent Kenyanya, please.
Appreciate it, Mr. Chair. My question actually maybe for Regent Rocha. I was curious what his thoughts were about the audit committee chair sitting on the audit committee. I mean, is it the same principle there, or do you see that relationship different? Just curious on your thoughts on that.
Regent Rosha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that actually is a segue into the, kind of the comment that I would make in light of all that's been said. I don't disagree. I don't quarrel with anything that's been said. It's a matter of a sort of perspective. And, I guess maybe it's partly my career path that, lots of good people doing good work is great. But a lot of my work comes from lots of good people saying we don't need a contract because we're all good people, and it works until it doesn't. And I have no reason to believe that it's not going to anytime soon. I think it's a very good group of people. The foundation's been extremely successful and very well run. But again, as I say, it's looking out to the future, envision a circumstance where there could be a tension there. But with respect to Regent Kenyania's specific question, that was a question that I had at the time as chair of audit. But as I was serving solely on the audit committee, and I was not a member of the foundation board that ultimately makes decisions on behalf of the foundation, I did not, raise a concern about that participation. In fact, what it did do, it convinced me how extremely well run our foundation is. I think the audit committee is very strong, and the audit processes of our foundation are exceptionally well performed. And so it's because you're not a member of the board itself, but just that subcommittee. With respect to that one component, I didn't believe that created that same level of conflict, but it's a very good question that you asked.
Okay. Anyone else? I'm looking closely at the screen here, Regent Rosha. And I don't see anything else around the table, and so I will bravely call for the vote on the motion to this separated part of the consent report regarding regent nominations. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Got it? Any opposed? And then I note 2 abstentions. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. That motion is approved. All right. We'll turn now to item 6, a discussion of the peak implementation plan. Senior Vice President Franz and Vice President Horstman will join us. President Gable, I think you want to kick us off on this one, and over to you.
Yes, well, thank you, Chair Powell and Vice Chair Sviggum, members of the board. While the technology is being set up and people take their seats, I will just sort of level set that creating greater operational quality and efficiency is a focus of our collective action throughout the strategic plan. We have a variety of ways in which we're engaging in continuous improvement practices to promote this intersection between quality and efficiency in all aspects of our operations that should and could reduce our administrative overhead year over year as a happy byproduct of this effort. A bold system initiative emerged from this focus, which we are calling PEAK. And as a reminder, PEAK stands for Positioned for Excellence, Alignment, and Knowledge, which is exploring new organizational models around shared services, streamlining administrative activities, generating recurring savings, leveraging investments in systems and technology, and the possibility of outsourcing or insourcing. It also leverages the OpEx work that has been going on over the course of about a decade now into a bigger, bolder, and more transformative initiative. And I promise I did not choose the word transformative. I had that already in my notes before we heard from Rick Beyer this morning. So at the center of this new work, we're asking ourselves a pretty simple question. Can the university achieve greater efficiency, effectiveness, and service through more systemic change? Senior Vice President for Finance and Operations, Myron Franz, and Vice President for Human Resources, Ken Horstman, are charged in addressing this important question. And they're here today to walk you through the project goals, timeline, and our initial focus on human resources as the phase 1 function. They'll also provide a roadmap of recommendations for implementation over the course of MPACT 2025. The aim is to yield improvements in service, improvements in quality, focused and aligned staffing, efficiency, and other positive outcomes. But before I turn it over to them, I want to express sincere appreciation to them, but also to the literally thousands of university family members who've been responding to surveys, engaging in consultation, doing small groups, Senate committees, students, faculty, and staff who have been really instrumental in the consultation and collaboration necessary to get us to this point. And I thank them in advance because, of course, we're not done yet. So at this time, Mr. Chair, we'll turn it over to our vice presidents.
All right. Thank you, President Gable. Gentlemen, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for joining me, Vice President Horstman.
Good to be here, SVP.
I feel like we're the warm-up show for Dean Toller and Vice President Michael Gove. Thank you so much, and thank you for that great introduction, President Gable. I think one of the things we wanted to start off with, before we get to the final projection of going forward and our roadmap, is really talk about three questions that really get us to this point. And illustrate why it's critical to do this work now. The first question is, where are we today? Where's the university today in regard to these services? Now, our research shows that our organizational structure can lead to duplication of work and inconsistent services, and in some cases can impact the ability of individuals to be successful and grow in their careers. We have made incremental improvements, as President Gable mentioned, over the years, but given the challenges that we face, that you heard about this morning in higher education, now is the time to make a coordinated and holistic change to deliver administrative services. The second question is, where are we going? We are analyzing new and scalable models of service delivery that are already in practice around the country. And these are flexible enough to address our different needs of the different administrative units, the colleges and campuses. And this is not a cookie cutter or one size fits all approach, but a very customized and strategic process. The final question is, when the work is done, why will the university be better? We believe that there will be greater clarity of roles and responsibilities within the administrative functions and less focus on manual tasks, allowing for greater focus on mission and service delivery. We will have more streamlined business processes and improved user experiences for students, faculty, and staff. As been discussed, we've made smaller changes in the past, but the PEAK initiative really is different. It is a transformation, to use that word again, of people, processes, and technology. It is a new way, excuse me, it is a new way of working. In short, it is the implementation of a continuous, ongoing improvement philosophy across the administrative services that will support the university into the future. Now, in July, we showed you how the initiative looked at ways to increase efficiency and gain capacity in order to support the university's mission and the strategic objectives of the Impact 2025 plan. And it's important to remember that as important as a PEAK initiative is, it is one initiative of Impact 2025. And it must be coordinated and interrelated to the Impact 2025 goals. As we talk a little bit about the project goals, the President mentioned some of these generally. I'm not going to belabor these points. They're fairly clear. But what we want to really convey is that think about the user experience. Think about the people at the university that need to seek HR services or procurement services or IT services, and making sure that we improve that end user experience through these different processes, focusing on those things that really require the talent of the people we have at the university, and give them an opportunity, give our employees the opportunity to be truly successful in their roles and their expertise in this university. One of the things that we do expect the PEAK initiative will result in adjustments to the pace of experiences and overall cost savings. However, that is not the primary objective of the initiative. But let's talk a little bit about the timeline quickly. We've reviewed this before, but wanted to make it clear that this is a multi-phase timeline, and it's going to ultimately lead to the implementation of the opportunities that we select collectively to move forward. The first stage of this process was focused on data analysis and identifying opportunities within the scope of the functions at issue here. The assessment phase was also to define the vision and guiding principles that we will use to carry forward throughout this project. Now, since July, we've been in the bridge period. Focus on continued stakeholder engagement and to develop and prioritize opportunities and translate them into a project structure and how to proceed in our project plan or the roadmap. Now, we're now in the design implementation phase, which is really the do part, as the circle suggests, where we design, align, launch, and develop measures of the identified recommendations. Now, based on the experience that our consultants have in higher education and in the industries in general, with similar kinds of projects, full design and implementation of the PEAK recommendations will likely take 2 or more years, and the work must be carefully sequenced to support the successful implementation as we go forward. So if you look at the current state that I mentioned a little bit ago, once again, I'm not going to belabor these points. They're fairly obvious. These are the qualitative and quantitative issues we need to address. And we have the data to know where these issues are occurring. And we know from people that the current operating model is not working to our best advantage. And staying the course or the status quo is simply not an option for the University of Minnesota. The peak assessment phase, which we're working on now, has identified these areas of inconsistency and duplication of work in these different areas. So these are the areas that we will be focusing on and have driven us to come up with the opportunities and how to best approach solving these current state issues. So if you go to the next slide, Vice President Horstman will talk a little bit about some of the peak initiative opportunities as we move forward in this endeavor.
Thank you, SVP Franz. Changes to our service delivery will be coordinated across the 12 functional disciplines that are in scope for this project. And these will ultimately result in changes to how people work, to how our processes move forward, and to technology. These changes will be designed to enhance belonging at the same time as they improve operations, because individuals will be clear on their roles. Through the course of the time we have been assessing our project, we have identified different types of recommendations related to the way that work gets done. And the opportunities that have come into focus will change the way the university approaches, organizes, and manages its service delivery across these functions. An example of some of the opportunities that will change how people work with processes, how processes change, and updates to technology are areas such as centers of excellence and shared services, which we have discussed before, a greater talent management discipline and career path opportunities. Function-specific processes will be reviewed to incorporate more efficiency and reflect the interconnectedness of the work across the university. And examples of this would be research administration and repetitive transactional processes. Technology changes will be addressed to improve the end user experience as well as improve our internal business process. We plan to improve the experience of both faculty and staff, for instance, with our travel and expense technology system, to have a more robust research technology tool, and to also focus and address our contracts technology so the experience of our users eases from the general counsel's office to faculty and staff. At the center of our efforts is a focus on service delivery across all categories and rethinking how administrative and support functions are organized and supported to support the university's mission. Most employees perform more than one function at the university, and while the human resource efforts serve as a foundation for this broader service delivery change, interrelated functions will be grouped as part of phase one efforts across these 6 functional disciplines. And there are similar challenges that need to be addressed across these functions in relation to process technology and organization. We will prioritize redesigning functions that are highly interconnected because that is where the most value will lie. Just in terms of scale, these 6 functional disciplines represent over $300 million of administrative effort. More than 1,300 individuals perform 2 or more of these functions for a significant percentage of their time. Additionally, based on information provided from more than 400 faculty members, research administration and finance administration activities were noted as particularly time-consuming and burdensome. As we think about the phase of the project and impact of our efforts, we are particularly focused on addressing the concerns of our faculty. And we are guided by 3 key principles, the first being service. That is always, I think, your starting point on the why and the impact you can have when you make these changes. This includes having common vocabularies, concepts, and culture related to service, and that faculty, staff, and students have a positive integrated experience. Effectiveness, ensuring that interconnected functions benefit from learning development, career paths, and accountability. And efficiency. The functions that are interconnected benefit from scale and can leverage that scale as opportunities change, and that critical activities are not left behind or duplicated. Of these functions, HR does become the critical enabler of change, which we will review in a little bit in more detail. The PEAK initiative will apply the principles around organization and a new perspective on how work gets done. It's important that HR is in place so it can support the other functional disciplines in this work as we move forward. And what we're really talking about, as we've said before, is how work gets done. The service delivery model for HR would first occur, which in turn would impact the other interconnected functions. We believe that these functions are critical for ongoing and broader organizational change. They involve programs, policies, and structures that provide the mechanism for change. They're critical to facilitating broader organizational change, and HR staff will need to be in place and available and have capacity to provide leadership support for complex changes that could come in the other functions. So efforts are already underway to develop this framework, the tools, and to ensure our success. The process will also require developing a talent and workforce strategy, prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion, and managing change and cultural shifts that support success for the other functions in our long-term success. So this slide I could speak to for a while because it's our current experience, but I will just try to hit it at a broad level to give you an idea of how things work today. There really is no clear approach on how an employee searches for information today. Current processes and structures do not provide a dedicated staff to provide consistent human resource services efficiently, and as a result can't consume additional resources, inadvertently cause confusion and around accountability, and create additional operational risks. Today at the university, the path an employee takes to gain answers to their questions depends on the role of the employee, the campus, or employee's position. Answers can be provided by everyone on this list, and often employees who are seeking a certain answer may actually go to more than one source until they get something close to that answer. Not the way we want to function and not a way to manage risk. A priority workshop was held in August for 2 days to confirm the recommended critical path opportunities with our human resource leadership in our central office and campus human resource leads. For 16 opportunities were confirmed as a priority, and these can be referenced or reviewed in our appendix to this presentation starting on page 64. One of the 16 critical path opportunities is enhancing our shared service model. So we'll just go through this too to be efficient. And the message here, and we've talked about what a future HR support model might look like. So I think we are familiar with it by now. But the real message here is if you stand up the left side of this slide, direct access, self-service, shared services in a seamless, efficient way that is accessible to all of our faculty, staff, and students, where the resources are immediate, painless to receive, answers are clear and consistent. That allows the right-hand side of this slide, which is the deeper expertise in human resources, to focus on their areas that can bring real value. So the centers of expertise would work in the talent management area and would not be brought into the shared service forum as they may be today. Our total rewards function the same way. Our employee and labor relations groups, they can be more strategic and develop programs and plans and monitor them. Our strategic partners in the units, our HR leads, are more available to leadership to look at workforce planning, career pathing, and generally providing counsel to leaders, looking at the engagement of their work environment. So as we move to the future and we look at opportunities, the headings on the three columns of this slide will be relevant to every functional discipline that is in scope in this project. But some of the key factors that we hope for outcomes can be summarized by just looking at a few words. We're looking for clearer accountability, clarity of roles. We're looking at resources that can be scalable and leveraged, that aren't compartmentalized, but are agile to be moved to where the needs are. We're looking for efficiency. We're looking for employee engagement, which can increase, especially items like job satisfaction, when their roles are clear and they have training to support their work. We want to execute on a system-wide HR strategy and not be decentralized in that. And I think that is one thing that if we talk to our overall HR community today, we may not know exactly every point of that strategy, but they are all focused on having that system-wide approach. And we've talked about career pathing and retention. Self-service does need to be maximized as much as possible for this to happen. That will improve the employee experience. And we need to look continually at limiting manual processes and efforts as much as possible in those areas where there is value to do it in a more efficient manner. So at this point, I will turn it back to SVP Franz to take us home.
Thank you, Vice President Horstman. I think one of the things we know is that we don't have all the answers. And what we do know is that we need to engage and talk with people around the university. And we have our consultants who are here today. If you have any questions for them from Huron and KPMG, people who are help guide us through this process, who have done this before. And we want to make sure that we continue to seek feedback and questions, provide opportunities for faculty, staff, and student engagement, and do occasional system-wide communication on at least a monthly basis, but really making sure that we have ongoing progress report updates, which we anticipate we'll be making to this board again in December, where we will update you on the actions that we have engaged in over the last several months at that time. But this Peak Initiative Communications, is the title says it all, that if we're going to be successful and engage people, we have to communicate a lot. And I want to thank Vice President Kramer and his team for really supporting our efforts in the communication areas as we work in standing up this function. I just want to mention on the next slide a little bit about some of the engagement that we've had already. We've been engaged in many different groups and individuals, and we really wanted to make sure that you understood that we've met with 4 different governance groups, 6 different Senate committees across the system to provide updates and opportunities for peak discussions. We've highlighted the purpose of Peak and the next steps. And we've also are currently engaged in meeting with functional leadership, as you can see in the bottom line, second box from the left there, that we're engaged in functional leadership to make sure that those individuals who manage different functions within the university are engaged in designing and helping us implement the next steps. We've had an advisory council that was extremely helpful in giving us input from around the university, and thinking and talking about these issues in an open way has really provided an incredible supplement to the studies that we've done, the information collected by our consultants. So as we go into the next steps, it's really important that we can continue to provide this board and the community with updates. And as we're obviously giving you one today, and we'll provide another one in December where we will come forward and provide more ideas about what our budget will look, anticipated budget will look like. We'll provide updates to our consultants' contracts for review by this board, and making sure that we have the right resources going forward. But I think it's also want to make sure that we can show you more and more detail as we fill this process out. If you go to the last slide, this is really the roadmap that we're using to begin the implementation of this initiative. As you obviously the first lane there about information gathering will be ongoing and really an extensive part of where we are today. The foundational work in terms of understanding how to make this change management strategy work, how we do a governance and accountability and provide operating procedures and service level agreements is really a key work that we'll be engaged in ongoing for the next year at least. But the service delivery, where we start really making these changes in HR, finances, general administration, marketing and communications, procurement, and research, these are the 6 areas that we're focusing on for the next phase of implementation work, where we will start actually redesigning and designing the function and how we implement that in different units. Clearly, there'll be some cases we'll pick particular units that are strategic, provide opportunities to try some of these concepts out and make sure that they work before we have them implemented around the university. You know, the service delivery on the phase 2, the other 6 functions will continue throughout this process. So there are many lanes going on at the same time, and that's why we have a peak success office that we have set up and continuing to work on supporting that with the right personnel to make sure that we have a project manager on board to keep this facilitated. And, you know, there are other opportunities we're going to find along the way. At the bar at the bottom, really, we're quite excited about the fact that some of the opportunities that we think will happen, we'll discover along the way. We'll come up with some new ideas, and I think there'll be some synergies from implementing this work around the university. This is the chart may look simple. This is anything but simple. It's not for the faint of heart. As we've talked about, this is a transformational change for the university in the way we deliver and our services and provide more support, as we know we have to, more support for our mission of research, teaching, and service. And we believe this is the roadmap that will start that process. So anything else you want to add, Vice President Horstman?
No, I think we can go to questions.
Thank you.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you very, very much for the presentation. We'll turn it over to the board now for questions. And while we're waiting for hands to go up, I thought I'd jump in with one. I know that, you know, different structures and different roles will be part of this work. But how much of it will also be enabled by technology, you know, either technology that we already have that maybe is underutilized or new technology that we'll need to bring in? I just want to get a sense for, you know, technology as an enabling, you know, tool for this work.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll take the first shot. I know that Vice President Horstman wants to mention one as well. But if you take a look at the research administration component, a huge effort at the university, and we are in the process now of implementing a new contract management model, IIT system model, that was decided before we even began this Project Peak initiative. So part of being strategic is for us to marry up that process so that we now make sure that we strategically design those functions to support that implementation of technology to help manage the extensive reporting requirements under all of our research contracts. So there's an opportunity for us to marry the redesign and the redeployment, if you will, with that new technology. But I know that Vice President Horstman has an example as well.
Yes, if you look at the shared service project, there are current PeopleSoft components that were not implemented at the upgrade several years ago that provide self-service. And so we're not utilizing them, but we own the technology, so it's not a purchase. The resources, obviously, to stand that up will be required. So that is there for us to realize. The other part is if you look at something like our contact center, which will be within the shared service arena, we use Salesforce right now, which is a leading practice system, and can be further utilized as we build our knowledge base, but our telephony is not current. And so that might be an opportunity where we need to go to market and see what would be most applicable. And another one that's interconnected, there are other contact centers at the university that it may be wise to look at how that applies more broadly as we go forward.
Very good, thank you. Regent McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Powell, and thank you both for keeping us pacing as we go forward with this critical initiative. And I know that we maybe pop up that last slide, the one with the arrows. I think that's a really good reference point for how this thing comes, this effort, this big set of work comes together for all of the university. And I know that at the outset, President Gable made a commitment that we would not affect core mission. And I think that's good. So what we're affecting ultimately is all of the processes, and I'll call it the corporate work and the business that goes on to support those three missions. But I see research in there and service delivery phase 1. And I don't see, of course, education or outreach. And I'm not asking this because I think, we need to get into any of that. But if you were to take the 3 core pieces of our mission and overlay them on this, I mean, where is the biggest impact going to be seen across those 3 if we're not going to affect them? I guess it really boils down to which ones have the most process support for them and how much change are they going to see. And as we get into those, this from gray to maroon to blue to whatever that phase 2 color is and gold on the bottom, when do those core supports really start to feel and see impact and change?
I'll start first, if that's okay. I think my first reaction would be that we, in fact, it's part of our mission engagement has been to be actively involved with the faculty, because one of the number one areas we want to make sure, even though we're not delivery of academic services is not a in-scope function, the support of that academic services obviously is. And if we do this right, one of the things we hope is to free up the administrative portion of the teaching positions now. I mean, one of the problems has been for a lot of faculty is taking on administrative work and because of whatever needs there might be there. And our goal is to make sure that faculty, whether it's a dean or a professor or instructor, and they need services, they can access that service without them needing to supervise, review, and get involved in administration, whether it's HR or finance and procurement. So there are a lot of touches, if you will, to the support of the teaching mission itself. And we've engaged with a lot of faculty about their concern, at least initially, was, well, wait a minute, if you're going to redesign this administrative function, I don't want you to take away those support and then all of a sudden I'm doing more. That would not be a good result, right? And our goal is not to do that. It is to provide more consistent and more high-level support for all faculty. So in my particular view, I think we're going to see opportunities immediately for the teaching element to be supported more directly by this effort, and especially as we go forward. Same thing with the research, as I was mentioning. To the extent we can provide the IT and the people support to manage these incredibly complex and very compliant-driven contract issues, we can enhance compliance and reduce the need of the faculty to oversee that as much. But
yeah, thank you. I would just add to that, again, a reference to what's in the appendix. If you look at page 55 of the docket, I believe it shows our project structure with a number of individuals named there. And those are people in the functional disciplines that will be engaged in the actual project, along with other people we identify. But there's also an opportunity for faculty and academic leadership to be involved in that as well as we go forward. So we are building that early in the project in the design and collaboration stages before we start to implement. The other piece I would say is the change that will be evident, hopefully, in the value that'll be there is right now at the university, you need a life form in front of you to think something's getting done administratively. What we do with this is it'll get done. It'll get done reliably and timely with a high degree of service level, but you may not necessarily need that person right there in front of you. And if you listen to some of the faculty leadership, their experience over the years is there have been administrative reductions is, to Myron's point, they have actually taken on some of these this work, which we would prefer that they don't spend extra time doing or their time doing. So hopefully they will see this as an improvement, but you know, we have to be able to do it to probably have them accept it. So they will be engaged in the process as well.
I know we talked a lot about this in some of our discussions, and I don't know if we made it as clear today as we should have, but these improvements are not the result of our employees' failure to deliver service. It's our failure to provide a structure that gets them to the person that wants that service as quickly and as clearly as possible. People are doing a great job around this university. We have a lot of talent. And what we're trying to do is enable that talent, provide support for that talent, provide opportunities for that talent to have careers, progression, and support the academic mission of the university.
All right, very good. I'm going to take two more, and then we'll have to wrap up. Regent Sviggum.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Please bear with me, VP Franz and VP Horstman, for a couple minutes. And I'm going to try to bring this question maybe in a direction you don't want to go, but it's where I want to go for at least get some type of response. I understand that the focus of PEAK is not to bring cost savings. It's not the primary objective. Okay, I buy that. I understand. I love the words transformational. I love the words improved organizational structure, strategical design. Love those words. But let's go home back down to the farm just for a second. I want to get to some bottom line. We went through Operation Excellence with President Kaler. Very, very fine program. I think for 6 years, Dave, maybe it was. We saved, we didn't save, we redirected to our mission about $90 million, I believe, to the real mission of the university, which was wonderful. We took from the little less mission to the greater mission. Down home on the farm, we try to produce more corn on each acre of land. We try to become a little more productive in our efficiencies to reduce our costs. We got to reduce our costs to make some money. That has to be done. So my question to you is, we've paid some money to Huron Consulting. We've paid some money to KPMG Consulting. We've had lots of university meetings amongst the committees that you've spent significant resource hours in. Tell me at the bottom line, I understand that this is not the importance of this project. But still at the bottom line, I'm looking to say that there's going to be some efficiencies or some cost savings, some headcount savings or some dollars that we're going to be able to save of students in their tuition or redirect to our mission or something. In 5 years, Ken, give me a ballpark of what this might be able to redirect to our mission of the university, or redirect to less student tuition, or make everybody operate more efficiently. Give me a ballpark. Is this PEAK initiative, are we just spending money to come up with these wonderful words of transformation, or will we be able to redirect monies to the real purpose of the university?
There will be savings that can be redirected to the mission. And usually in a project like this, your first year or two does have some investment. As you get to year 3, you'll start to see savings. And as you go into year 4 or 5, it's fully mature. And the initial numbers we have show a year-over-year savings that is quite significant. I don't know that we are at a point probably before December to really give.
Okay.
Do you feel good giving a ball?
No, and I can wait till December, Ken.
Don't look at me and ask that question.
Well, you're the finance guy. I mean, no, but it will be a significant amount, and it won't necessarily come from immediate workforce reductions. What we're hoping is, I mean, our employee count is down 3.5% over the last year. So there are some savings already there. We think we can manage through a lot of this with attrition, with people moving into new roles. There may be, every time you go through this kind of change, there are people that just self-select to go do something else too. So all of that will likely happen. And in the end, we will probably have resources that were dedicated to administration that can be repurposed elsewhere.
But Mr. Chairman, and not to prolong it, I'll wait till December. I want a number. Okay.
I know you
so
do.
I probably won't be here in 6 years, in 2028 or 2027, but I want to look back and say, was it successful or not? Did we meet a goal? I will also, I've mentioned attrition here for 4 years on the board, and David doesn't want to hear it anymore, maybe probably, but I've mentioned attrition as a avenue to use, and certainly the efficiencies, but bottom line, down home on the farm, I want to know a ballpark number so I can judge whether we were successful or not just the wonderful words of transformation and, those wonderful words that you all use. Give me $1.
Yeah, well, we can do that at our next update, I believe. We actually have had some analysis this week that shows us some of that, but we need to look at it before I just throw it.
I wait for December meeting on the heels of President Kaler gave us a number, 90 million. I remember it exactly, right? You were chair, Mr. McMillan. Wonderful redirection. I wait for a number in December.
Let me give
yes,
just,
Senior
Mr.
Vice
Chair,
President.
let me give one spoiler alert, and that is, in the corporate world, these kind of projects, I know the chair is aware of this, that these kind of savings to me anywhere from 5 to 10% in the corporate world when you go on a project like this. And in higher education, the expectation is more in the 3 to 5% area. So as we put pen to paper in the next several months and come up with our projections, we'll have some more concrete numbers for you to look at in December.
Okay, and Mr. Chairman, just very quickly, Ken, don't use the 3.5% reduction that we already had in headcount as a result of peak, because we haven't initiated peak yet. So, start me at start me at the right level.
No, I won't do that, but I do think a lot of the approaches we've taken in the last year lend themselves to the work that's going to be done in peak. I don't think we just started this as a new approach. We've been doing it in different ways for a long time. And our neighboring schools are doing it. We see new examples coming along of people engaged in this type of work in higher ed. So, it's incumbent on us to follow this path, I think.
Fair enough. Thank you. Thank you. I think President Gable would like to jump in.
Yeah, I just want to, just for framing purposes, we are going to include the 3.5% reduction in headcount, Regis Sviggum, because the timing of the project is based specifically on the fact that we engaged in those programs in order to position us to be able to do this. So the fact that we're holding the headcount reduction that was inspired by a budget shortfall rather than a program, that is a program to hold the headcount reduction. And so just to be clear, we will be taking credit for it. Whether you want to give us the credit or not is entirely up to you. But the other thing that I want to say is, while a savings is absolutely an outcome, there may be decisions that we make that may not save as much cash, but result in a better quality of service, a better way in which the function of the university happens. We need to, and we can be transparent about where those forks in the road are, but the team will not only be making the decisions based on cost savings. This is a strategic program, not a cost reduction program. And so the targets are around how to be of the highest quality in the context of efficiency, which should yield savings. So if we were just driving for a number, we wouldn't be doing any of this. We would just continue the annual cuts in the unit levels, and that would be the end of it. We can do that every year forever. But if we want to be thinking systemically and transformatively about how we run better so that we can do our mission better, so that we can have our staff with clear career paths that are fulfilling to them and our faculty able to do what they do best, all for the purposes of our students, then we can't only be focused on saving money.
Understand. Mr. Chairman, just very quickly.
Very quickly.
President Gable, it might be credit for me. It'll be blame from somebody else. You know?
I understand. I understand.
What I call credit, somebody else is going to call blame, or
Fair
what I
enough.
call blame, somebody not.
Regent Hibbs.
Oh, excuse me.
I thought you were done.
But I should be done. But I do see
A lot of agreement.
I came to this head count thing that McMillan always talks to me about. In my simple approach, see that reduction in our head count at this point as being a consequences of the COVID problem that we face in this country and at the university and reactions to that, not necessarily to the peak initiative. And maybe I gotta get a less clear line there, but go ahead, Mr. Chairman. I took more than my time.
Thank you. Thank you. Regent Hibbs.
Thanks, Chair Powell, and thanks for yielding the floor, Darrell. I'm going to throw out a word, transformational, since I want to say it too. Everybody else got to say it, but I do feel like this is a transformational change. And I feel like we've gotten a lot of buy-in to this point from everyone on all levels. You know, you had your charts out there and stuff. But as the rubber meets the road and as we get down to the nitty-gritty of this, how are we going to continue getting that buy-in from all the staff? Because that's going to, change is tough. You know, people that have been doing it one way for many, many years have a hard time changing. And that's going to be important and paramount to making this successful, I think, so.
Yeah, and that goes to our project management office and having an emphasis on how we manage change in that office as well as in each of the functional disciplines as we go forward. And that isn't just, you know, we have wonderful communications on this and a lot of support in that. This really goes to what you just said, Regent Heapsch, is, you know, when people are impacted, they need to know ahead of time. They need to know the reasons why. They need to know where they're going. And we need to be supportive of that. And that's part of this project. I mean, with all these functions that are interconnected with 1,300 people doing multiple aspects of it, there is going to be some complexity to when do we release a change and how do we minimally impact people so they aren't getting tapped on the shoulder month after month. And that's something we're very sensitive to and building into the project team right now.
All right, thank you. Very difficult and very important work, and we really appreciate the leadership and the effort that's gone into this. And I think it's fair to say we do believe that this can be transformative, and I think I can speak for the board. Our expectations are very high for this, and we look forward to the next update in December. Thank you. Thank you. I think we should take a 5-minute break. And so we'll just a short break, we'll come back and we'll go into the next item. steal one of those from my grandkids. Yeah, there you go. Okay, we are back live streaming. And we'll switch gears now to another topic that is a very big priority for this board, and that is the health sciences strategy. Today will be first in a series of conversations on this topic, and it'll focus specifically on clinical research. The Dean of the Medical School and the Vice President for Clinical Affairs, Dr. Jacob Toller, is joining us for this discussion. And before we turn it over to Dr. Toller, again, President Gable would like to provide some introductory comments.
Thank you, Chair Powell, Vice Chair Sviggum, and members of the board. The health sciences at the University of Minnesota is an incredible strength, and every day we lean into a rich legacy of delivery through learning, discovery, and service. We have amplified and I would say harnessed, in the best sense of that word, these strengths into goals and actions aligned to our Impact 2025 commitments in discovery, innovation, and impact, and also with emphasis in intersections, including our work to drive innovation for next generation health. Across these endeavors, we're continuously seeking to improve and innovate, particularly in how we think and engage from the classroom to the lab, from rooms in communities, locally, and then around the world. And at the core of these commitments is an acute focus on partnerships, which, as the following presentation will highlight, go further than just health sciences disciplines in order to impact our health, healthcare, research, and beyond. So yesterday, you saw some of this in action when we had the chance to tour the Health Sciences Education Center and see how a building and its people help us shape the future of healthcare, from state-of-the-art classrooms to simulation and immersive training that demonstrates the transformative potential of healthcare education, which amongst many others is significantly impacting and advancing the health of our citizens, our state, and of course, arguably around the world. So our Vice President for Clinical Affairs and Dean of the Medical School, Jacob Toller, is joining us and will provide an overview of our broader health sciences strategy, including current opportunities and those planned across our colleges and schools collectively to advance this strategic plan. So at this time, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it over to Dr. Toller.
Dr. Toller, a pleasure to see you. It's over to you.
Chair Powell, President Gable, Regents, it's actually beautiful to be here because I can see that you are smiling even though you have the masks, because you can tell by the muscles around your eyes. And this is why we are here. When you visited, I thought, this is a tremendous moment. This is a precious moment because what you represent is not that only you lead the university as shapers and doers. You also are a representation of what university is, which is lifelong learners. And when I have seen Regent Davenport, looking at the printed vertebral body, and then Regent Johnson exploring, some of the radiology parts of this, and then Regent Hipsch looking at good old Vesalius from 16th century with so much attention, I thought this is the right place. And it's very personal for me, because I have been here for 30 years, as many of you know, and this university shaped me in who I am. And I will give absolutely everything to this university, its clinical enterprise and its medical school, to put it in the trajectory of greatness that you expect from us. So today, I'm gonna follow the dictum, from you and look at how we are gonna take the missions of the medical school and the university. And like tributaries of the great Mississippi, we teach, we provide research, we provide clinical care, and I would argue we will also provide the equity of healthcare access, and we will add to the legacy of the university. With every single accomplishment, the past changes, because as we add to the past, it changes, right? Because the people after us will have different past than we had. And the work at the university is glorious in part because of that exactly. So what I'd like your help today and your attention today, your guidance, your insight as always, is why we are doing this, why we are focusing on specific things that I will present to you, how we gonna take what matters and distill it into things that are tangible, meaningful, and practical for people who live in Minnesota. So bear with me, we will drill down to the specifics. We will drill down to things that are actionable, that are on the ground, and we will travel together. So the obvious thing is that the expertise of the university is multidimensional. And if you bear with me, it is deep in a way that we go from molecules, from mRNA, made famous now with the vaccine for COVID-19. We go to cells, we go to animal models, we go to patients, their families, to the communities. We have that breadth, that network of knowledge that is so important. At the same time, the continuum goes in a levels of magnitude. We can go from anywhere in the state and provide healthcare that is needed. We can export that knowledge in almost any place where it's needed. And we train people who will come to the small cities, small settlements, areas that have been underserved for sometimes years, sometimes decades, sometimes centuries, and we can change all that. There's no one else, no other body, no other team in this state that can do what this glorious university can do. Now, we take our estimation from others. I don't know whether I'm any good in clinic until I see the outcomes of my patients. I don't know if I'm any good in science until I see the papers published, the grants awarded. We are living by the frame of reference with our peers. And National Institute of Health and other federal bodies provide not just the priorities for the United States in research and in healthcare, they also provide a very valuable metric in how are we doing in this. And that's why our attention to what's called a Blue Ridge ranking, which is the amount of NIH dollars, is so important and so much on our minds always. And as we look at the NIH, at the federal priorities, they are very motivational, at least for me. They are looking at disparities in healthcare. They are looking at communities. They are looking at how do you not just collect data, but how you disseminate data. Because one thing that people outside of this university have sometimes difficulty to understand, science is not collection of data points. Science is the way you think. Science is the way you pose questions. Science is the way of intellectual professional life. The data collection is the proxy, is the externalization of this. But it's really a different mindset that is, I think, especially today, over the last year and a half, I would say, it's really important whether our mindset is based on reality, rationality, or mythology. And university can uniquely aid, I think, others in not just providing the medications, not just providing the clinical care and the research, but also help in how we think about how we deal with the challenges in our societal life. So the good news is for the university that we can do all of this. The equally important dictum, in my opinion, is that we don't do all of it. You see, the capacity of being able to deploy in a certain direction, in my opinion, means also that you have the discipline, the focus to say, out of these 10, 7 I will not do. They are important, but I will not do them because I would dissipate the capital, people capital, environmental capital, material capital, whatever that is, into areas where it would not be as impactful as if you focused. So that's where the Impact 2020 and the President Gabel phenomenal way of grasping this in its entirety and then delegate it to the different areas of the university is so important. So when I look at the commitment 2, where it's discovery, innovation, and impact, that's where we live. Because we gauge our impact from how meaningfully we change the life of people in Minnesota. And I would say that the findings that we find in Minnesota have many, many times, not just today, but in the past as well, impact worldwide. And that's how it's supposed to be in medicine. That's how it's supposed to be in engineering. That's how it's supposed to be in science. The commitment 3, of course, is the intersections. And we collaborate across the multiple campuses in Rochester and elsewhere with Chancellor Carroll. And how do we drive the innovations for the next generation health. So the healthcare, with your help and with your leadership and guidance, will change dramatically this decade. We will move away from what is very difficult to navigate system to something that is patient-oriented, family-oriented, predictive. We will not wait for people to get sick. We will try to go upstream of this, and I'll have several examples of that as we go forward. We will be more precise because of the almost molecular ability to look at some of the physiology and pathophysiology. And this way, we will deliver to the state of Minnesota, based on the permissive architecture of University of Minnesota, what the state deserves. So let me describe to you some of the contributions that we already are having underway. The first one is, I'm gonna go back to this, funding is impact. This is a proxy. This is, again, as any metric. This is not the substance of it, but it is really a good guide. Are we traveling in the right direction? So we look at the Clinical and Translational Science Institute, which is the largest grant at the University of Minnesota. And the second largest, to my knowledge, is the Masonic Cancer Center. And they both live in the Clinical Affairs Office. And we are up for a renewal just next year. And we are hopeful about this, but it's like a red queen. It takes all the running to stay on the same spot. We have to run twice as fast, because everything in the realm of science and how you get funding for science is, whether we like it or not, competition. And I like competition. It is a zero-sum game. There's only so much in the NIH dollar, bucket. There's going to be 3 billion more, we hope, this year, but it's still a limited number. The collaboration across the university, the networks that I see are not just the horizontal network of so many areas of excellence, so many areas of accomplishment and brilliance. That's the substrate. But then you can have a command that comes from the middle of this. And you say, for this particular challenge, I need these 4 or 5 across the university. And one of the main ones where I come often is the Vice President for Research, now Dr. Oakes. And he is who I go to for infrastructure, services, compliance, and then we can spread, across the other services as well. The example that I will give that is more closer to the medical school proper is Dr. Wiedek's work on deep brain stimulation. Many of you have known the phenomenal history of state of Minnesota in area of cardiac pacemaker. There's a version of this, very different, but version of this that can be implanted in the brain and is incredibly helpful in patients with Parkinson's, in patients with epilepsy, with patients with obsessive compulsive disorder. And my prediction is that many of these conditions that we now treat with medications that you swallow or are injected will be treated with magnets that would be distributed over the skull and adapted in this way. And I will not talk today about the Institute for Developing Brain, but a lot of the knowledge that will be used across the whole continuum of human life is being gained from there. So Dr. Wiedek is the leader in the deep brain stimulation, and we are building on this with industry, with Medtronic, with 3M, with others, to really make it reality. And the Institute of Engineering and Medicine is one of the best maneuvers that we have done with our teams in the last decade, because the engineering and biology have not traditionally lived together other than the, if you will, cyborg way that you put a device on somebody's heart or somebody's brain. The engineering and medicine means that you understand the physical properties of the cells and of the physiology in a way that a biologist would not look into this. So I'm an oncologist, bone marrow transplant doc, and even 20 years ago, we felt that cancer is a disease of a cell. Then we felt maybe not. Maybe you need the stroma, you need the surroundings. So it's a disease of a tissue. Now we know very well it's a disease of organ systems. It's an immunological dysregulation as well as the one that we are having on the side of the individual tissue. So these are the example of quote unquote from the impact 2025, increasing the high impact of discovery and scholarship. And it aligns with the regental and presidential directive of increasing the year-to-year funding as we go forward. So the beautiful thing again on our position is that we can engage on all these levels with focus, with discipline into a product that I think that the patients will appreciate, and certainly the state of Minnesota and its people deserve. So we went from the high level, which is the land grant mission of the university, the NIH, the federal environment of this, and then the university strategic plan. And then I'm gonna go a level down where I think are, for your review, untapped, sometimes, strength of our clinical enterprise, connections that have not been done yet, and changes in policy that I think will make this possible. This is what's happening. So this is where our best and brightest, in the fight against COVID have gathered and are just getting ready to approach the COVID menace. So COVID, of course, has been, one of the challenges that defined this university and many others and our society in general. In contrast to many other societal responses, I think this was a challenge that we trained for. This is not something that we have accepted as victims. This is not what we sort of waited out. We really stepped up and were able to answer it with agency and with what people of Minnesota wanted from us. The personal protective equipment that you have just been donning and doffing, much of this has been generated in our College of Science and Engineering, College of Design. I still remember a year and then some, ago when we were able to connect with these colleges. No other place can do this easily. That we went to Dean Strawhecker, Dean Kave, and we had this like in days. The second is the wastewater. Wastewater is a measure, societal, public health measure. When we go in close to 20 counties now and look, is the virus there? And we can actually have what we call a heat map. This is a different color map that we can distribute across this. And we have a predictive value that is very, very high, so that I can then know with my friend and colleague, James Herford on the mHealth Fairview, how many patients should we expect in the hospital? How sick are they gonna be? Where are they gonna come from? And can make some rational and education-based comments, on where this is going. The Clinical and Translational Science Institute is going to improve the response of the state to the next pandemic. So again, being a realist, but an ambitious one, I am saying that the COVID-19 was a starter pandemic. There's going to be something like, I don't know what it is. Doesn't have to be a virus, doesn't have to be infectious disease for that matter, but it's going to be some challenge that the readiness that we have built into our teams now is going to be very, very helpful to us. And hydroxychloroquine experimentation, Vice President Horstman just asked me about this. We were the place that showed decisively that this is not the right medication for many of these things. Good. Okay, my second topic is geroscience. So geroscience is something that is close to many of us, and it's something that's gonna change the way we look at healthcare and life in ways that has not been done before. Let me just put it in perspective. My typical patient in the healthcare system is 74-year-old with 3 diagnoses. Most of them are caused by a common condition. It's a disease. It's called aging, and it has to do with the number of senescent cells increasing in tissues and secreting things around and triggering an immune response that then causes atherosclerosis in the heart, can lead to the MI, dementia in the brain, diabetes, cancer. All of these things have common denominators. It's not as simple as I'm describing this, but it is the important and helpful heuristic that if you take the system that we have in front of us, which is that the information that is in the human genome, in the DNA, degrades over time. The reader cells, the correcting cells, are declining in number. And that if we can purge the tissues of the senescent cells, we can delay aging. I'm not talking about lifespan, Regent Sviggum. I'm talking about the quality of life. I'm talking about how we can free people from disability, from disease, and from what we now are seeing as almost overwhelming in the society. 10,000 people in the United States get to be 65 every day of this decade. That's a lot of people. And 7 of the 10 will end up in some kind of a long-term facility. So we better do something about this now. And I am not gonna describe it, but you can hopefully see the parallel of with the Institute for Developing Brain in the developmental and social conditions that cause disease. Because that is really how we go upstream of these conditions, because you cannot catch up when they already develop. So School of Public Health, School of Nursing, both are incredibly relevant and important in this space as well. And my number 3 is where we go to the farm and rural health. There are 65 million Americans that live in what's called rural America, and they traditionally have not been given the access to the same quality healthcare, and we are gonna change this. The one way how we're going to go about this is that what used to be called Clinical Research Facility, and now it's called Health Discovery Hub, which is the building that's going to be next to the CSC in the corner between 94 and Huron, is going to house the teams that in part will be charged with exporting that knowledge, that medical knowledge, to greater Minnesota. And the reason we know that it's going to work is that we have done it. That's the best, right? The Minnesota Cancer Clinical Trial Network that we have built with Mayo, with other players in the state, that's exactly what it is. It makes it possible for people in International Falls to get the same treatment they would get if they were in the metro. Never happened before we had that, and very successful. Telehealth, of course, I'm grateful to President Gabel for connecting me to the different organizations, and the exporting is obviously hinging on how you export the signal. So broadband is very important, how you connect, across these distances and so forth. And another brilliant idea that she had that I have put at the center of our interest is that if there are 2 major themes in the state of Minnesota, there are agriculture and health. And if you can put them together, simple but brilliant, that would be a winning combination. So that's what we are doing with extension with Dean Berg from CFANS, and building upon what we already have in the community. And the good example of that is the medical discovery team, one of the 4 that the state has generously funded some years ago. That's called Memory Keepers. This is for Native American population in the northern Minnesota, and in answering a scientific health-related question, which we call syndemic occurrence, disproportionately more than you would expect, of diabetes and dementia in some groups of Native Americans. Now, the last example from this group is opioids. So I did say that we trained for COVID-19 epidemic. I said that we responded with courage, with agency. But I also will say that many people were traumatized, sometimes broken by anxiety, by loneliness. And unfortunately, what happened that addiction went up. And there's a 27% increase in overdose and fatality from overdose in the 18 months that are spanning the COVID-19 pandemic. And most of that is happening in rural America. We are looking at this very, very intensely. And one of the medical discovery teams is based on answering the question for the state on addiction. And we are probably the only place that I know that has a clinical trial of a vaccine that targets one of the opioids called oxycodone. And again, this is in service of getting this to the people that need it. And this is how we collect the areas of brilliance around the university and the state into something that's doable, pragmatic, meaningful, and actionable. So for next generation health, this is where we are at the moment. And now I'd like to go over several of the investment areas that are more immediate, more within the reach, more something that we need to be doing right now, right this moment, and that's what we do. The first one is a mobile Resuscitation Consortium. So again, President Gable and others have been incredibly helpful in this effort. And with College of Science and Engineering, with philanthropy from mediated by UMF, and certainly stellar cardiologists that we have led by Dr. Yiannopoulos, have been able to put the machine that's a heart and lung machine in a truck and then export that technology to people who need it. So the critical medicine fact is that after the heart stops, after the first 10 minutes of the resuscitation, the overall survival drops 20% every 10 minutes. So you can do the math. We were incredibly energized by the fact that we were able to increase the survival rates to the level that you see here. And it is personal. One of the first patients we had was a 26-year-old male. He's at the barbecue on Saturday afternoon, has a heart attack, and essentially is dead until the truck arrives. And he's now back with his family. It would never happen if you were not in charge of the tool that has to, again, be the span between the engineering and medicine. As always, we never miss an opportunity to serve. So when we were asked by a member of Congress to partner with industry on trauma care, much of the knowledge is derived from a battlefield, from military experience. And I am grateful to have one of the people, Dr. Bielman, who is one of the best trauma surgeons in that realm, to lead this. And while we are still waiting for the resolution on spending bills in Washington, it seems very probable that we will be able to put together a team that then again can be deployed to the centers, to the places of trauma where the trauma can be much less of an impact. The learning health system is a new concept. It's a new concept only when you read it large. On a small scale, when we are in the rounds in the intensive care unit, on the bone marrow transplant floor, in the operating room, it's a given. Of course, you're all teaching, learning. The teachers, my experience, personal, sometimes learn more than the learners do, but they don't know that, the learners, that is. And but taking that enormous intensity and that enormous appeal of information, that power of information, and crystallizing it into a data set that you can use across, say, our joint clinical enterprise with Fairview, the mHealth Fairview's James Hereford, that is how we build the data science platform around it. It's not very different in many ways than a driverless car. The driverless car is not a driverless car. It's a computer on wheels. You get a lot of data and a lot of information from that single thing. Our devices, cardiac, deep brain stimulation, the ones that pick up from the neck, the arrhythmias perhaps, they are again data sources, for us. So we are using all of this power to elevate the ability to learn from the data that we have, and again collaborate with School of Public Health, with College of Science and Engineering. We are very open-minded. We are open book, in this, and that what strengthens the team in a way that otherwise would be impossible. My last example is from our collaboration with College of Veterinary Medicine and Dean Mulgard, which is looking at cancer, my day job, can be understood better and can be, this time with the radiation, can be approximated in the animal patients and then to human patients. We have done some of the game-changing work in one of the most difficult to treat tumors that I know. It's called glioblastoma. And as we sit around here, whether we like it or not, because we went to college, we have about 15% higher risk of having glioblastoma in our lifetimes than everybody else. We don't know why that is, but certainly this is something that we are looking at. And I have a great honor to be able to work with researchers on both animal and human sides so that we can advance the radiation oncology in this way. Okay, so I'm getting to the point when I have listed on this slide for you the metric and outcomes that I'm sure you would expect from us. So this is the funding, the community partnership, the industry partnerships, the trial enrollments, and what it means together is a discipline, it means focus, it means confidence that is earned in this. And yes, it means taking risks sometimes, because if you don't take risks, I think, in enterprise, in markets, in science, in clinical care, that are well informed, but if you don't, you will not be able to change status quo. And if you invest the people's energy, the money in status quo, we get status quo. And that's not what we want. We want to change the practice of medicine. We want to change the outcomes of the ailments that we see around the state. And to do that in a stepwise way, I would say we solidify the base. We go after things that are absolutely foundational for us. One is immunology. It's probably not even disputable that we have one of the best immunology in the world. Oncology, cancer, neuroscience, this is our base. This is where, you know, we are leading on the national and international. The second is branching out, because once you have solidified the base, I think you have enough momentum to be able to branch out. So that's what I told you about geroscience, infectious diseases, the learning health system, that falls in that category. And then build out on success. So if we have this kind of success in the ECMO, for example, there's the resuscitation mobile unit, we will build on this. If we have this success in the TrueBeam, this is the animal and human radiation oncology, we build on that. If we have success with devices in the brain and elsewhere, we build on that. So taking this together, and as I said, never missing the opportunity to serve in the rural medicine, in military medicine, in medicine that is difficult, we always will take that opportunity. And I'm grateful to the vice president's very entertaining duo that preceded me, that both are a huge part of our ability to actually do that. Now, as I get to the final of this, due to your guidance, due to your support, Presidents Gable and others, I think there is no question that health science research is the strength of the University of Minnesota. We are here to advance healthcare for all Minnesotans, and we are here to get it done, not 10 years from now, but now. Learn by doing, understand by doing, and learning from within the communities, from our patients, from their families, how best to do that. And we have the best team to do it, right there on the screen. I'm grateful for the time today, for the leadership of the board and President Gable in advancing the MPACT 2025. And I'd be delighted to answer questions.
Thank you, Dr. Toller. Always inspirational. We have just a few minutes for questions now. Regent McMillan.
Thanks, Chair Powell, and thank you, Dr. Tolar. NIH funding, critical metric. Give me a sense of macro level disruptive risks that you see apart from better competition, which you mentioned, and apart from divisive politics. Is there anything else, if we're going to hang a lot of our stars on that metric, that we should be worried about? And maybe in the process of thinking about, you know, whether there's disruptors in that world of funding that we're not thinking about, what's the post-pandemic world look like for funding? Because I know there was a jump, and you said something about $3 billion. So maybe you could just comment on those. And then at great risk, I take issue with something you said. You said the state has agriculture and health. Don't forget trees and water and natural resources, okay?
Chair Powell, Regent McMillan, of course, you know, and Duluth is the best place of the whole state. I think that one of the expected side effects, not unexpected, is that in the process of response to COVID-19, the science gotten a lot of confirmation, a lot of affirmation. Don't let us not get distracted, I think, by a lot of the social media, the mythology, the shadows and dragons. The science works, and people know that because now you can get mRNA vaccine that did not exist 12 months before it was first used. Science does work. And the federal budget responds to this. So this is not just the NIH budget proper. And even though I'm sad that my friend and once collaborator, Francis Collins, stepped down just a couple of days ago, this is gonna remain one of the determining forces in the United States. And we also should look at this a little globally. We have one of the best percentages of investment in science and technology in the world. It's a large country, it's a lot of money, and that's why a lot of scientists and clinicians like myself choose to come and work, in the best medicine and best biotechnology in the world. This is going to be biocentric. This is gonna be where we look at technology and engineering in this way. There's an additional, so the disruptors, my position to disruption is that you either disrupt or you're gonna be disrupted by somebody else. The entropy, the second law, is pretty clear. It's pretty clear, but you can counter entropy by infusing energy in a localized, focused way. And that's exactly what we are doing. There's a program called Advanced Research Project Agency for Health, ARPA-H now, that got $3.5 billion, again, pending the approval of the spending bills, and competing for these very large grants is going to be one of our strategies how to get there. Was there another question? I apologize.
We have time for two more. Regent Rocha.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. In the interest of time, I'll withhold at this point.
All right, thank you, Regent Rocha. Regent Mayron, you'll wrap us up.
Sure, thank you. What impressed me so much about what you brought to us in this presentation is all the collaboration you are doing with organizations, entities outside the university. This fits so well with what we did this morning in governance in terms of where we could be looking for in terms of our strategic planning and the idea of bringing together, affiliating with a variety of different organizations. The work you're doing is just peppered with it, and I applaud you, applaud the university, the medical school for what you're all doing, and encourage you to keep doing more and more and more.
Chair Powell, Regent Mayron, thank you very much. I think that this is our way of expressing the highest version of ourselves. This is a moment rich in promise, and I hope to continue to merit your confidence.
Wonderful to see you. We look forward to seeing you again in the new year, I believe in February, with another installment, and it's great to see you. Thank you, Dr. Toller.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Powell. Regent.
All right. Okay, that brings us to item 8, which is a discussion of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Very important discussion, a key priority for this board. And this too, like our last item, will be the first discussion in a series on this topic, focusing on one campus at a time. And today we'll hear about the Twin Cities campus from Provost Rachel Croson, Vice President Michael Goh, and Keisha Varma, Associate Vice President for Equity and Diversity. Welcome to all of our presenters, and President Gabel, over to you.
Thank you, Chair Powell, Vice Chair Sviggum, and members of the board. So as the chair said, as a university, of course, this group and for our community as a whole, as we've articulated in MPAC 2025, we're leaning into our commitment to advance a community and a culture where a sense of belonging is strong, accessibility is valued, and equity and diversity are actively promoted. Much of this work has centered around components because we want to tie to a way that we can create transparency and measures, hold ourselves accountable, and be able to also show our community whether things are working or not. And these pillars have been representation, climate, and partnership. And today's presentation will highlight this work through the commitment for language under community and belonging, which is broken down into these 3 key areas. This summer, we completed a DEI progress report, which described how the university across all campuses, colleges, and centers is meeting these important outcomes through the MPAC 2025 goals, and is also meeting this moment in time that really has nothing to do with our strategic plan, but does coincide. This report was intended as a progress report. It wasn't intended as exhaustive, and it was meant to inform our community about the breadth and scope of our efforts across the system, but also to create transparency and a mechanism to identify where we can improve. One of our biggest challenges is that we do so much that it's hard to articulate in a simple way everything that's going on. It's a good problem to have, but a problem nonetheless. And this report, the action items and goals under the strategic plan and the presentation today are intended to create that pathway to clear communication about the vast amount of work that's happening. So to this end, joining us today is Provost and Executive Vice President Rachel Croson, and Vice President for the Office of Equity and Diversity, Michael Go, and Associate Vice Provost for the Office of Equity and Diversity, Professor Keisha Varma. And they will together highlight these DEI efforts from the report from this summer and then going forward around accountability, education, training, strengths with tribal nations, recruiting diverse faculty, and other areas of emphasis. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair Powell, Vice Chair Swigum, President Gable, members of the board, for the opportunity to discuss this very important topic that President Gable has gratefully introduced. I share apologies from Associate Vice Provost Keisha Varma, who's unable to be here today, but we're grateful for the efforts that she participated in preparing today's presentation. This is the first in a series of presentations focused first on the Twin Cities, and then followed by Duluth, Crookston, Morris, and Rochester throughout the year. For this reason, I will be giving a little bit more of an overview, a system-wide view, if you will, because you as a board actually encourage us always to do system-wide thinking. So I'll share some framing around the DEI work at the University of Minnesota. We will then focus in on how DEI is embodied in the MPACT 2025 strategic plan. We will then describe an important process of calibrating our work through mapping, analysis, and alignment. And then we will end with some current efforts to demonstrate the progress that we're making in 3 particular areas representation, climate, and partnerships, as President Gable has mentioned. So it's important, if you will indulge me just for a minute, to situate this work historically. DEI work at the University of Minnesota is ever evolving the same way the social, cultural fabric of this nation is evolving and an unfinished business. As a result, unlike some other issues that may happen at the push of a button, DEI doesn't happen at the flip of a switch. We are therefore standing on the shoulders, importantly, of the work of our predecessors, administratively, faculty, staff, students, even regents previously, that shows that in previous iterations of strategic planning exercises, we have devised models that have been foundational and continue to inform the work. Even from way back in 2007, if anybody remembers, the framework that is nationally recognized, called the University of Minnesota Equity and Diversity Framework, emerged as a result of President Brunick's strategic plan. We then translated that foundational work in 2014 for the Twin Cities board-approved strategic plan into action steps. And it's interesting, in a 7-year cycle now, we're back at rethinking, reimagining the work appropriately to move this work forward. What is interesting that was not noted in the previous slide is an important figure as well, University of Minnesota Regent Josie Johnson, a former professor as well, described in her memoir the title Hope in the Struggle. And I think words there are important. First of all, remain optimistic. But it's interesting in the Josie Johnson that we all know as eternally optimistic, she chose to use the word struggle, because I think she recognized that this work needs a long view. It's a marathon, not a sprint, if you will, and it will require persistent working on previous efforts to move forward. What has stood the test of time from all these various iterations of our DEI strategic plan are these 3 strategic priorities that emerge from focus group meetings, faculty, staff, and students on the Twin Cities campus, as well as across the system. Our community basically said, no matter how creative, how crafty you get with your terminology, transformative or otherwise, don't stop doing three things. Number one, we need to increase representational diversity. Number two, we need to improve campus climate. And number three, we need to build, support, and align system-wide strategic partnerships. You will recognize this, therefore, in President Gable's DEI progress report: representation, climate, and partnerships. These three remain centered and vital and are embodied now in our MPACT 2025 strategic plan. And while we can say that DEI resides in every single commitment in the plan, it is centered a lot on the work of commitment number 4, community and belonging. I titled this next slide, People and Organization, because I think it's important to recognize the multiple offices, the multiple layers, the multiple units system-wide that we have to interact with. And it's important to not overdo meetings and committees, but it's important to connect, it's important to coordinate, it's important to collaborate, if at all, to calibrate how we are meeting the objectives of this and the metrics of this current MPACT 2025 plan. As a result, we are forming a leadership collective comprising all DEI leaders represented from colleges, from units, from divisions across the system to make sure we all align all our efforts and can measure our efforts to know that we're making progress on commitment 4 in particular. Additionally, it's important that the Chief Academic Officer, the Provost, and we will give you an example of her work with the Twin Cities Deans in how we try to coordinate and collaborate this effort. I have previously presented about College Made, which is basically our vehicle in the Office of Equity and Diversity of meeting with the Twin Cities Deans to bring data, to discuss how the data reflects current progress on representation, climate, and partnership, and how we as an office and as a system can offer resources to help them meet their goals. The first step in calibration is an important procedure in which we have 4 major goals with the assistance of an external consultant to help us map, analyze the scope, impact of DEI efforts system-wide. As President Gable has mentioned, we have vast amount of efforts. It's not people spinning the wheel, it's not people going through the motion, but we are trying to calibrate from the inventory of activities in the DEI sphere, how are we doing and what are we doing? So importantly in this analysis is to establish the gaps, but also to celebrate what we do well and try to resource those and accentuate those. It is also important to understand, assess, and articulate how these programs align with the system-wide plan moving forward. If they're not, how can we make them better aligned? And if they are, how can we resource them to keep them in the lane? Most importantly as well, in earlier discussions of efficiency, even with the peak process, we are ultimately interested, are we appropriately organized and structured? Not just the Office for Equity and Diversity, but as a system in moving the DEI goals moving forward. But we don't, even while we continue to calibrate, we don't press any pause button, the work continues, and I'm pleased to report in 3 particular areas representing 1 example each in representation, in climate, and in partnership. But we'll go in the order of climate, partnership, and representation for a reason will become apparent to you. So regarding climate, a key ingredient, I suppose, in climate is people. Our community is diverse in multiple identities, in a broad definition of identity that we have in our office. And we want them to interact, we want them to engage, but when they do, there is a tendency to become oppositional and tensions will rise. And we as a higher education institution believe that education is indeed the center of our mission. So action item 4.2 is to develop education and training to increase intercultural competency and interactional diversity, with the goal to increase the number of people who participate in intercultural competency and interactional diversity trainings from year to year. I'm very pleased to report on this note that we're making excellent progress. If you just look at the numbers, this is a good, if there's anything such a thing as a good byproduct of the pandemic. We had to shift remotely and we moved a lot of our education trainings online. We created a platform that allowed more access across the system. More than 4,000 participants participated in the last calendar year. The number keeps going up in what we call Equity and Diversity Certificate hosted online. And the workshops have been filling up. Even this particular semester, our workshops completely filled the capacity within 1 hour of registration opening. And that's not a miss. There are not too many zeros in that percentage. You see that we have increased our reach and interest by 1,000%. Additionally, we have received a customized request beyond our 10 educational topical certificate program to go into units, to go into colleges, to go onto system campuses to help facilitate specific needs across colleges and units, and more than 100. So those numbers aren't even counted there. Will boost our numbers of trying to reach more and more participants from year to year. Another example of collaboration is the Office for Undergraduate Education, Office for Student Affairs, Equity and Diversity, and the Multicultural Student Success Engagement Committee have come together to help create what I consider still a pilot, but it's a good pilot that has now rolled out to serve education, equity, diversity training to our first year students and undergraduate students. And you'll see the numbers. More than 10,054 students have participated so far in this program. And 92% of that constitutes 92% of our first year undergraduate students. And more importantly, what they claim as a result is that it has helped them improve their listening skills. It has helped them to be more prepared in engaging in ally behavior. And one percentage that we haven't shared is about 76%, if I remember the number correctly, are more inclined to say, I would like to engage and learn from people who are different than myself. What I think this reflects in this particular action item that we're pleased that we're making good progress is that our goals as a Board of Regents, as an institution, are reflected in the appetite and the interest and the motivation of our community. And that blend of energies is helping us reach our objectives. The next area of progress I'd like to report on is the area of partnerships. Action item 4.3 specifically states that we want to strengthen collaborative relations with tribal nations. And the goal specifically is to meet with leadership from the 11 sovereign tribal nations at least 3 times a year. It's important to note in this area that we're starting from 0. And we have now, thanks to President Gable's authentic motivation, hosted more than 5 meetings. I think I'm even being conservative with that number. We have also invited, right from the start, President Gable's inauguration for the first time, invitations to all tribal leaders. And if you might recall, behind you during the inauguration was also a first, that all 11 tribal nations had their flags and offered their flags to be present, given the location of this university on tribal Dakota land. And thanks, I think it was Chair Powell at that time that gave acknowledgement as well to this land. Credit also to the Board of Regents for approving revisions to the American Indian Advisory Board. And as a result, another first historically is that all of our 5 campuses have constituted and convened meetings for the American Indian Advisory Boards, whose charge is to focus on how we can better access, recruit, and help the success of the American Indian students on all of our campuses. But that may sound to our public maybe like checking the box. And I want to be clear that while those symbols are important, the substance of our work is what drives us in this particular action item. And as many of you have been engaged, the issues are not easy ones to resolve. But as many of you have also participated, thank you, Regent McMillan, for visiting the Cloquet Forestry Center. You will understand that there is deep desire to find resolution between the university and our tribal nations. And this is just one of multiple issues that we're currently addressing with the tribal nations. The university has also hired University of Minnesota Duluth alum Karen Diver to be another first senior advisor to the president, and she joins senior director for Tribal Nations Relations, Ted Johnson, in forming the university's first Office for Native American Affairs. So on those fronts, we are very pleased to be reporting progress. I saved this one for last, but first to say we are making progress because this item, recruiting diverse faculty, like other similar items in action item 4.1, has goals to increase the percentage of underrepresented faculty, specifically in this item, year over year. But I saved this for last because it's less linear and it's complicated and it involves multiple moving parts, if you will. And just to illustrate, it starts even before my first bullet to pipelines, to how we are preparing students for college, how students are being successful, how students are being introduced to the notion. And we have efforts at the university targeting that. But on the basis of faculty diversity, recruitments per se, many of you know it starts. It's not in the preview even of the provost, of myself, or the president directly, even though many people demand that we hurry up and hire. A lot of the hiring falls in the realm of faculty who hire faculty. And therefore, we have tried to borrow from and learn from best practices around how to constitute search committees, the composition of search committees, the educating of search committees around bias and how to mitigate bias, how to assess how we craft job descriptions that may emphasize in a more direct way that the university is committed to DEI in order to attract some of these individuals that many other universities and our competitors are now also trying to compete for. And then how we advertise, how we network, and ultimately how we conduct our processes to really attract people to our campuses. Attracting is one, thriving and belonging is the other, and that's why even though we have good colleagues who mentor, who support, we have the Center for Educational Innovation, we have programs that support faculty, but we also borrow from the best practices of the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity to help our faculty, our junior faculties, learn the skills they need to survive the requirements of the academy. We were also selected to join National Science Foundation funded Aspire iChange Network, which creates a structure to help us improve our own institutional structure, what people perceive to be systemic barriers. We are willing to put a mirror to ourselves to do that work. And lastly, I want to spend a few minutes just introducing the President's Postdoctoral Fellowship Program. This is not your traditional postdoc, as many people know, where faculty are typically relegated to isolated labs. This is about intentional engagement, intentional programming to help students, our junior faculty feel a sense of welcome. This is, for your information, only 10 years old, this Presidential Postdoctoral Fellowship Program as a concept of the University of California system, partnered with the University of Michigan in 2011. In these 10 years, we were the 7th university system to be invited. I know the number is bigger if you count some of our good company in this area is what is called the California Alliance that has Berkeley, Stanford, Caltech, and other universities, Maryland, Carnegie Mellon. So to be invited to participate, I think is a great honor. And for us to say yes reflects our commitment to this pipeline of scholars. Focus is on research fellowships that prioritize faculty mentoring, professional development, and academic networking opportunities, and it embraces a cohort model. These are some of our numbers. The program is 10 years old, but we're only in our 4th year with a four cohort. And for an unfunded initiative at the University of Minnesota, we're doing pretty well. To be able to increase some of our numbers. These numbers are small, but we're slowly building our capacity to be able to do more in one of many efforts to recruit faculty. And this shows also the growing representation of colleges that are applying. Even though this is a Twin Cities presentation, I want to note that the postdoctoral fellowship program is afforded to the entire system. And we do have, to the credit of our system campuses, faculty recently getting their PhDs who apply to some of our system campuses in the last year, but it has not been a match. Just so you know, the talent that's out there, some of these people that apply to our university actually get job offers into tenure track assistant professor, not postdoc, assistant professor positions. And that's how we've lost, I think in the past year, candidates to Duluth and Morris campuses. My last slide before I hand this over to Provost Croson is not to show you this picture to calm you. And to connect with nature, is to let you know that 18 hours ago or so, actually more now, a group of these postdoctoral fellows and their families and their mentors and the mentor families, and one fellow's family that drove all the way up from northern Iowa just to come to this picnic at Minnehaha Falls, because as has been brought up several times, we are in higher education high touch. So it's easy to say we have Board of Regents increase our percentage this year. But we know that that's simply a number. What happens is, will we keep them? And as titled in compartment number 4, will we create a sense of community for these faculty and a sense of belonging? And so the work expands beyond just getting the number. And with that, I'm very pleased to pass this to my important partner, Executive Vice President and Provost Rachel Croson.
All right.
Thank you, President Go and Chair Powell. Vice President Go has described an array of centrally driven efforts that have been impactful on the Twin Cities campus and elsewhere. Of course, he wasn't able to describe everything that we do centrally, but hopefully his remarks give you a flavor of what's happening. In addition to these and other central efforts, our colleges engage deeply in the DEI space. In my work with deans over the past year and a half, it would not be an overstatement to say that this is a foundational commitment and among our highest priorities. We will quite simply not be able to achieve our educational research and outreach missions if we don't continue to advance in this area. As we'll discuss at a later Mission Fulfillment Committee meeting, I've been working with the deans to ensure that our impact measures are translated to the college level and incorporated into our budget processes and into the performance evaluation for each dean. The measures from Commitment 4 are no exception. Each college has set goals for progress along these metrics, and each college has a set of initiatives designed to reach these goals. I often use the following 3x3 because I'm an economist, so I like tables, to help conceptualize these activities. We think about BIPOC representation. We think about closing gaps in achievement, in advancement, in other outcomes. And we think about inclusion and belonging as measured by climate among each of 3 audiences: our faculty, our staff, our students. Each college has activities designed to advance these goals in each of these cells. And many have activities even outside this table as they work with their communities or in other outreach activities. For example, in CFANS, the multifaceted initiative to develop and retain students and faculty of color uses an integrated and systematic approach. One aim is to increase CFAN's faculty of color by 25% over the next 5 years. It also includes the Diversity in Food and Natural Resources Scholarships, the Minorities in Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Related Sciences student organizations, and Learning Across Differences training for faculty and staff. The College of Design is planning a cluster hire for faculty who focus on social justice issues in design and has launched a Design Justice Collective that works closely with their BIPOC student organization to focus on cultivating personal and professional development for all students. The College of Liberal Arts is expanding the size of their MLK cohorts to provide educational programming that fosters engagement with the complex issues of power, privilege, and social justice. The College of Biological Sciences is offering training to its faculty in inclusive teaching practices. And the College of Education and Human Development is expanding the support offered to its TRIO students, primarily low-income first-generation college students, to help them succeed in college. I could give you many, many more examples, but in the interest of time, I'll stop here. As I hope you can see, and as Vice President Go often mentions, DEI work is everyone's work. It is not only his work and the work of his office, but my work and the work of the deans and the vice provosts and the associate deans and the department chairs and the work of individual faculty, staff, and students. Ensuring an inclusive and equitable environment where anyone can succeed, regardless of their identity, is fundamental to our principles and the principles of our state and our nation. So this concludes my remarks. Chair Powell, I know Vice President Go and I would be happy to take questions or hear feedback from the board.
Thank you. Thank you, Provost Croson. Thank you, Vice President Go. And I see, let's see here, Regent Hipsch, over to you.
Thank you, Chair Powell, and great report. Just on that last slide that you just had up, how do you, what goes in those boxes? How do you measure climate? Okay, so what, is that a percentage of something? What, I mean, how do you measure that?
Sure, great question. And of course, there are multiple measures. Different colleges have different ways that they measure. We also rely on the Employee Engagement Survey, which is of course very universal. It goes across all of our campuses, all of our employees. And there are specific questions in that survey that Vice President can go talk about.
And I'll add that, so it's about a sense of respect, a sense of belonging. But I'll also add that there are two other surveys that the Twin Cities campus uses called the SARU, a Student Experience at Research University, and GradSARU, Graduate Student Experience at Research University. And as we pointed out, our system campuses, just for your information, utilize different surveys as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically what you're saying is that you do these surveys and then it's kind of a percentage of people that are on board with the questions that you answer that feel that the climate is satisfactory or not satisfactory or whatever.
Actually, thank you. Chair Powell, Regent Hipsch, thanks for your question. I think if I understand the metrics correctly, it's actually very bold, which is expecting us to increase the responses in a positive direction. So the system-wide strategic plan actually names how we measure it, which particular question, and it increases. And I'm terrified because, in a good way, because of context and time and place. Because depending on when anybody completes that survey, what happens a few minutes before, what happens in the world that is completely out of our control can change that in a heartbeat.
Sure.
But that's our aspirational goal.
Okay, thank you.
Follow up, Regent Hipsch, you're good? All right, Regent Davenport.
Thank you, and I want to piggyback on Regent Hibbs' comments about that 3x3. I like that, and I see that you can hone in on accountability related to those multi-dimensions. So that was one comment, and then my second comment is on the it's slide 102. Participation in the Gopher Equity project online. How did you get that? That seems fantastic. I appreciate whatever efforts you took to get that percent. So I'm just curious how you did that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Regent Davenport. Did you want to comment or?
Sure. Chair Powell, Regent Davenport, thanks for the question. This is truly a team effort. The Gopher Equity Project is actually an online training that thankfully the university community previewed, gave feedback in its original imperfect form, and we continue to still be concerned that a video format doesn't always allow for all the content we believe students, faculty, staff should have in order to be equipped to contribute to an inclusive climate so to speak. But we don't let the perfect get in the way of the good. We also insisted that online be followed by discussion so that we understand how the material is landing on students. And specifically to answer your question, one of the few channels we have is the fact that all first-year students, and today it is the case that every college has a program for first-year students, participate in the first-year experience so that it's a common orientation to what it means to be a citizen at the university, etc., and how to best utilize. So we took advantage, if you will, of that opportunity to say all first-year program organizers, coordinators, college deans, if you will you please allow us to introduce this as a course that everyone takes? So that is the reason the number is so high, because all our first-year students, clarification, not all undergraduates, because this has only been rolled into a second year. All first-year students will participate, but the number is encouraging because undergraduates have also participated. Faculty, staff have also participated in a non-mandatory opt-in way. And that's why I say it reflects that this is timed at a moment where our community believes it is of benefit to me, I am going to opt in. Our current numbers, so that was last year's number, 10,054. Our current numbers that I received, I believe September 28th, is over 8,000 this year have already participated. So it's in a good way. We are really trying to introduce in no ideological manner, just very fundamentally, what does it mean to try to help us learn about differences, engage those differences in a way that we hope to graduate students that are perhaps more skilled than some leaders right now in demonstrating what it means to engage difference.
Okay.
I'll just follow up. I'm a great supporter of first-year experience, and thank you for your response. It's a perfect vehicle for this kind of initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Davenport. Regent Farnsworth.
Thank you, Chair Powell, Vice President Go, Provost Croson. This was an excellent presentation. Diversity, equity, inclusion is of personal importance to me, as I know it is for many others as well. And I think how we cultivate sense of belonging for students across the entire system is so incredibly crucial. Two quick things. One, I'd like to echo Regent Davenport's comments on the Go for Equity project. I'm familiar with some of that. That is great to hear some of the data and evaluation on that, and look forward to that continuing, particularly for first-year students. One thing, it's not really a question, it's more of a comment, but I'm certainly open to reaction. Something that we heard in Duluth a few weeks back from faculty was some concern around, particularly at the Duluth campus. Admittedly, I'm not sure if this is the case at our other system campuses. Around a concern at the Duluth campus we heard was not having a McNair program for first-generation students. And then I believe also there was a concern about not having the TRIO program at UMD as well. The reason I'm bringing that forward is because one, and not only because it's a concern that we heard that I wanted to make sure was voiced, but also how that then ties into our broader academic mission and some DEI components around faculty advising. Of course, that's a critical student success issue, kind of increased faculty advising burden being placed on our BIPOC staff and advisors. So I guess wanted to bring that forward, not sure what the case is for the rest of our system campuses, and wanting to highlight the discussion around academic advising, student support services in the area of advising, particularly when it comes to some of our DEI goals. So again, open to a reaction on that if you have one, but also happy to follow up at a later time. And thanks again for the presentation today.
Thank you, Regent Farnsworth. Vice President Go or Provost Croson, you want to respond to Regent Farnsworth's comments?
Thank you, Regent Farnsworth and Chair Powell. I note that I believe that President Gabel wrote a memo describing some of the background into some of those issues, but hopefully that's something you can dig into when we have the Duluth session.
Okay, very good. So we'll go deeper, James, when we focus on Duluth. Thank you for the comment. Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Real quickly, kind of following a bit on what Regent Farnsworth was just discussing, he referenced DEI goals. And what I would find really helpful as we go forward would be, if it's available, as an articulation of what the goals are. Maybe I'm just too simplistic in the way I analyze things, but obviously for me, a big way of determining whether we've been able to address some of the environmental concerns as we try to make a welcoming environment for people of all backgrounds and different characteristics is what the numbers actually are. And so one of my questions, or the question I guess goes directly to what is our goal for what the community looks like, faculty, students, staff, and so on. Are we seeking to develop a community that reflects the community at large? Are we seeking to reflect a community as it will be based on demographic trends coming forward? And then how far down do we make that analysis? If you have a classroom that is not especially diverse in any number of ways, is that where we have concerns? Is it at the collegiate level? Is it at department level? It's hard for me to understand, because I think when we talk about DEI, we all understand the tremendous value of a diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment. I just, as a member of this board, and I'm trying to evaluate if our policy of improving DEI at the University of Minnesota is successful. How do I measure that? I don't know if that's something that we can necessarily answer today at this time, but that if something of that nature would be available, I would find that to be tremendously valuable for helping me understand what we're seeking to do and how the resources will be employed going forward to pursue this very important goal. Thank you.
Presenters, would either one of you like to take a shot? Thank you, Regent Rocha, for the question. Anyone want to take a shot at that now and briefly?
Sure. Thank you, Chair Powell. Thank you, Regent Rocha, for your question. I think what I appreciate is the essence of what you're asking, Regent Rocha, because the system-wide strategic plan right now is pretty clear on the goals and the column and the 2025. And I know with certain, the discussion has been had with the board before about why are some items so specific that we would have a target number. And yet on faculty, staff, students, we have something that simply says increase year to year. And I know that perhaps from a practical and maybe legal basis, any specific target would appear to be like a quota, which would be inappropriate. And that's why I think in certain areas we avoided that. But what I want to say is what I appreciate about your essence of your question, Regent Rocha. I know it's not just the numbers. In certain areas, we want to qualitatively be able to also capture if our actions have actually accomplished a different experience with the climate. How do people experience respect? How is it demonstrated in interactions? Are there examples of individuals in our definition of climate feeling a sense of autonomy, that two individuals with very oppositional views can be respectful without each canceling the other out? So I think we may continue to seek ways to get data that informs you, but otherwise the current version of the metrics gives us simply percentages increases. I don't know if Provost wants to add to that. No.
Thank you, Vice President. And I would just, add in for myself. I mean, I appreciate you're trying to talk about initiatives and strategies and actions, which is very, very good. But given that representational diversity and they're sort of inherently they have metrics that go with them. And I think as we continue to have these conversations, we don't need a sea of numbers, but I think if we can just get some of the key context in terms of the trends and the numerics to Regent Rocha's point, I think that's always grounding in a good way for the board. So Regent Rocha, are you good with the response?
And that's excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. And we will have Regent Farnsworth will have the final comment and we'll wrap it up for us. Regent Farnsworth, back to you.
Thank you, Chair Powell. And I did just want to quickly put a fine point on what I was saying. I do apologize for momentarily lapsing from the Twin Cities focus of today's conversation. Doesn't mean I'm not still concerned about it. I stand by what I said, but you're right. We'll bring it back up and discuss it in the Duluth conversation. Would then just highlight in the context of our Twin Cities conversation, I still think some of the foundational elements of my comments were what I continue to be interested, which is in academic advising in particular, tied to student success, tied to DEI, our work in DEI. What is our not only just traditional academic advising look like, but what does our mentorship components look like? What does our retention pieces in academic advising look like, particularly for students of color, for marginalized and underrepresented student populations here on the Twin Cities campus. So wanted to briefly apologize for that, but also put the fine point on some of the underlying themes that I was trying to convey that I think are very still relevant to the Twin Cities campus. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for indulging me.
Absolutely no worries, Regent Farnsworth. Appreciated your comments. And I think Vice President Go would like to just briefly respond.
Thank you, Chair Powell. Thank you, Regent Farnsworth, for your question. Just 3 examples: the Center for Educational Innovation, the work of the Vice Provost of Faculty and Academic Affairs and the Academic Climate Network, and our own Office for Equity and Diversity Multicultural Center for Academic Excellence. All 3 of these are just some examples in which we actually reach out to academic departments. We work with the Academic Advisors Network, I think, to address the point that Regent Farnsworth is addressing, which is it's not just our office, it's not just the provost, it's how can we prepare faculty, how can we prepare advisors, faculty in their interactions in the classroom, academic advisors in the ways they mentor, advise our students. So we're also doing education and training in all those respects.
Very good. On that note, we will conclude this very good discussion. Thanks to both of you. We look forward to ongoing discussions with you.
Thank you.
All right. We'll turn now to our committee business. A quick reminder that if there were multiple items voted on in the committee, we will take all unanimous recommendations of the committee as one motion. So that is all items that were recommended unanimously taken together in one vote, unless any member of the board would like to separate any of those items from the motion. So this follows our normal practice. Let's begin with the report of the Audit and Compliance Committee. Regent Kenyanya, would you please share your report with us?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Sorry for the delay. All right, the Audit and Compliance Committee did not consider any actions items this month, but we did have discussions on 2 topics. First, the committee learned about emerging research data security requirements being posed by research sponsors. We were assured that the university is taking appropriate steps in order to be prepared to address those requirements and in turn, continue important sponsored research projects. The committee then heard an internal audit report from Interim Chief Auditor Kelly Coons. She reported that since their last update in June of this year, that 36% of the outstanding recommendations rated as essential were resolved by university departments. This is in line with the expected implementation rate of 40% and a significant improvement from the 23% implementation rate that was reported in February. Additionally, 9 audit reports containing 45 recommendations rated as essential were issued in the last 4 months. Thank you, Chair Powell. This concludes my report.
Thank you, Regent Kenyanya. Regent Hibbs, will you report on the Litigation Review Committee?
Thank you, Chair Powell. The Litigation Review Committee met yesterday. At this meeting, we adopted a resolution that authorized the closure of the meeting to discuss matters subject to attorney-client privilege. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Regent Hibbs. For the Mission Fulfillment Committee, Regent Davenport, your report.
Thank you, Chair Powell. The Mission Fulfillment Committee had 1 action item this month. The committee voted unanimously to recommend approval of the consent report, which includes first, academic program changes, and second, conferral of tenure for outside faculty hires.
Thank you, Regent Davenport. Before I call for the full board vote on the consent report, would any regent wish to separate an item recommended by the committee from the motion? Seeing none, any questions or comments? And I don't see any there either. So Regent Davenport, do you have a motion?
I move approval of the committee consent report.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. All right, that motion carries. Regent Davenport, any additional committee business?
That concludes my report. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Regent Davenport. We'll move on now to the report of the Finance and Operations Committee. Regent Mayron, please.
Thank you. The report of the Finance and Operations Committee includes 3 items this month. First, I'll move those items that were unanimously recommended by the committee for approval by the board. Those items include the following: the resolution related to the 2021 6-year capital plan and the resolution related to the 2022 state capital request, and the consent report, which includes 1 purchase of goods and services, $1 million and over, 3 employment agreements, and 1 real estate transaction.
Thank you, Regent Mayron. At this time, I'll ask if there are any regents who wish to separate an item recommended by the committee from the motion. All right, seeing none. Any questions? Regent Mayron, if you'll move the motion.
Yes, I move approval of those items.
All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. All right, that motion also is approved. Regent Mayron.
Thank you, Chair Powell. The committee also adopted a resolution to conduct a non-public meeting of the Finance and Operations Committee to develop or consider offers for the purchase or sale of real property. It was the consensus of the committee that with 2 or 3 parties interested in the real estate, the administration can proceed to negotiate an exclusive due diligence arrangement with 1 or more of them, along with any other terms of any corresponding purchase agreements as discussed, on the condition that any resulting purchase agreements must be contingent upon board approval at a public meeting to be held prior to closing. There are no other action items this month. Thank you, Chair Powell. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Thank you, Regent Mayron. And then finally, the Governance and Policy Committee. Regent Verhalen, your report, please.
The Governance and Policy Committee includes 1 action item this month. The committee voted unanimously to recommend approval of the resolution related to policy amendments concerning the chief auditor. I move approval of that resolution.
Any discussion of that resolution or comments? I don't see any. So those in favor of that resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that motion is approved. Regent Verhalen, any additional business?
There were no other action items this month. I just want to thank the regents for their attention in preparing for and participating in our discussion this morning on adaptive governance.
Very good. Thank you. Thanks, Regent Verhalen. All right, that concludes the committee reports, brings us to old business. Is there any old business to come before the board? I don't see anything. Any new business to come before the board? All right, hearing none, this meeting of the Board of Regents is adjourned.